Hello.
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 Hello. ¿Serás un traductor en tiempo real? Yes. Yo les voy a traducir. Voy a tratar de, por supuesto, interpretar mucho de lo que dicen.
Early. No.
A little bit early. But that's...
This is
it's good, because Bex wants us to reveal the new thingy.
Wait, ¿por qué Chris está en donde Nugien?
I was just happy that you have less reason to bitch about, you know?
Are you... Okay, I'm a cool, easygoing guy, Rise. I don't think I've ever complained once in my life.
True.
That Tarky guy is just like a cool, easygoing.
Okay,
mellow.
una
That's
cosa
how
que
people
también
describe me, mellow.
es conocido Tarky al respecto es que Tarky es
That's love
súper...
life.
Sí, como lo conoce como que el man que se queja de todo a cada rato, ¿no? Se queja mucho y tal, y mucha gente a veces como que le tiene un poquito de rabia, pero es como que hagan lo que hagan, siempre Tarky tiene algo de qué quejarse. Entonces, le estaba echando broma ahorita acerca de eso.
For now,
Pero bueno.
let me hide.
Ah, yo creo que, bro, si esto funciona como yo creo, Tarky es un 5-head. Porque yo creo que cuando Siggy venga, todos se van a mover a la izquierda.
That sounds like
Yeah, because it's just I can very quickly change the Bubs picture to be
No way que
the
va a funcionar así.
reveal.
Good to
Boom.
see you.
Wait, why can't you see that? Oh, that broke something. Give me a moment.
Good morning.
Oh,
everybody.
that's what broke. There we go. That's what broke. Okay.
Ahí
The
está.
real ZD.
Yeah, I'm a
Oh
little
no. Me and Tarky are fusing. My worst
Se les descuadró
nightmare.
todo.
No.
Bro, o sea, esto es lo que yo hago todo el tiempo al inicio del podcast. La diferencia es que yo ya lo tengo más o menos cuadrado. Entonces no
Yeah,
es...
Chris, we're Lost Ark streamers now. Why aren't you
no es tan
you were
difícil. Ya tengo como la experiencia de cómo
doing
hacerlo y
ads
tal.
for streamers from
Pero
other
yo me
games? Why
sorprende,
aren't
dude.
you,
O sea,
you know,
¿cómo
having
¿Cómo
us promote
Tarky
Path of
tiene
Exile?
Chris Wilson
What's going on
aquí?
there?
Tiene un montón de streamers
Well,
grandes y
this is a
tal.
missed
Y,
opportunity.
y no usan... O sea, hay una forma
Sorry?
mejor de hacer esta, que es algo que pasó Javi como hace 2 años.
Thank you very much.
Y todavía
That's
no
what
lo he
I'm saying. This is
puesto
our
porque me ha dado
thing.
pereza hacerlo, sinceramente.
Battle
Pero es muy
Brothers
bueno.
streamer, so,
Pero es muy bueno que lo que se une a
Have you
alguien y es
ever
como
played
que
Battle Brothers?
la cámara en sí, tú puedes agarrar esa cámara y ponerla en el cuadrito y
It's
siempre está en el lugar donde debe
no
estar.
shade
Oh, no.
to Lost Ark.
Eso,
or Diablo
OS Ninja.
Immortal, but Battle Brothers is genuinely the best game ever made. I think you'd love it. It's like XCOM, but super grindy, medieval, low fantasy. It's like very Act 1 PoE.
Oh, that's
It's
cool.
very cool. I think you'd like it a lot.
Hay un poquito de delay en Chris.
It was made by like 4 guys. Very similar to like early GGG. It was made by like 4 guys in a basement in Hamburg, Germany. Overhyped
El
Studios.
espía, Pableras Croxy, el berenjeno y Pableras del caos.
Wait,
I'll check it out.
their name is Overhype
Yeah.
Studios, and you're their
great name.
spokesperson.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Okay.
I don't know what you're...
That's second only to an action RPG made by Grinding Gear Games.
True.
I enjoy it when people work that out after a decade of playing.
Y un super delay.
Wait, I only just got it.
Voy a subir un poquito de volumen. O
Maybe
subirme
someone
yo
chat.
volumen mejor. Ahí está bien, ¿ustedes escuchan
You
bien?
kind of went against that in the previous league. This league, more grinding. Last league,
Baby,
less
¿qué
grinding.
haces?
I don't know.
¿Qué estás
Or
haciendo?
was it this league? No, it was this one.
How am I...
Bien estupideces en Facebook.
Shove this
Oh,
over.
it's on the
just
screen.
over everyone's...
It's
there you
on
go.
the screen.
Wait, you're
Yeah.
spoiling it.
Bex said to
¡Oh!
do it now. We're doing it now.
40% del Chaos Damage lo tomas como
Like,
Fire
if-
Damage, 45% del
Everybody
Chaos Damage lo tomas como el
screenshot it.
Lightning
It's going away
Damage.
afterwards.
Esa es la del Templar. What?
Pretty good.
Oh my lordy.
Holy shit, las nuevas joyas son interesantísimas.
Okay,
I'm
Doug,
fixing
yeah.
it now, but
This
I
is
just
good.
thought, you know, let everyone get a good...
No, okay, yeah, no,
Let
this is
everyone get a
good.
good glimpse, you know what I'm saying? Because I have to make it small
Bufto RF. Dude, creo que va a jugar RF esta liga.
While we're reacting, though, does anyone sound too quiet, or does anyone sound too loud? In before I can still hear Rise?
Creo que está buena, ¿eh?
So you.
Yeah, yeah.
How's my volume?
You sound good to me. Apparently, you've got some audio delay.
Super audio
Does
delay.
anyone else have delay, or is it just Chris?
I'm fine, thank you.
Chat saying
Everyone but me.
puedes ir a low life sin CI, pero no por 100%, porque tiene 45%.
There's
That's
no
not good.
delay done on the Discord.
Okay, so what would... since I'm in a call with a bunch of professional streamers, what would I do to fix that?
Cambiar el servidor. Tienen que cambiar el
Use
servidor
one
de
computer?
Discord.
I'm just using one computer.
Delay.
Hay un delay en las voces.
It's easy to delay audio further. That's all I know how.
Okay, so how would I...
Tarky-
Wait, no, but that's not what we want to do.
Estaría preguntando, ya que está con un montón de
I can make
streamers
it worse.
profesionales, ¿qué puede hacer para
there
acomodar
is
esto?
one thing, hold on, that you might, because I've had delay on just one part before. Hold on, see if I can find it.
Noogie.
There is a way to delay a source or something.
But it's
You've
like
transformed.
there's also something else.
Does you going into research mode make you go grayscale? I'm very confused.
I don't know.
¿Por qué está gris? No, bro,
I opened OBS.
come on, dude.
It's because I opened OBS.
Okay,
When I went into
Chris, if you see this, this shit
for the
won't
record,
happen
I
if
did
you
tell
come to my
everyone
podcast,
this is
alright?
my
I
first
swear to God.
Baeclast since my new computer, so it might be...
Oh, Dios mío. Bro, o sea, tenía audio delay. Mira,
What
uno se
worse
puso
stuff
gris de
than me?
repente.
That's exactly what I said, actually, yeah.
Is it use device timestamps?
It seems
you
okay.
need to
It
turn
seems like
off?
OBS is the only thing. Yeah. So if everything's in sync on my Discord, how would what would I do with OBS to
Change
get rid of?
server.
No, but it could be if you click the
Discord.
cogwheel on
No,
the
wait.
audio thing.
What in Disco?
¿Qué pudiera hacer? Discord.
No, in OBS.
Yeah, sí, en realidad sí. Change Discord server.
I think it might be the use device timestamps
of
and like
the
click it to the other
times.
option.
Okay, give me a second.
Try that.
Okay, I've done the thing.
Everything.
Is any better? We
Sync.
chilling now, chat?
Hello?
testing.
Blah blah blah.
Hello.
Oh,
Oh, funcionó.
it's okay.
Fuck.
We fixed it, Noogie.
That was it. Yeah, I had the same
Yo.
problem. It's because
Okay.
it does it
Confusing.
when like
guess.
it
Solucionaron el problema.
desyncs my games, but not me when I'm talking.
¿Por qué le gritas?
Yeah.
Well done, Noogie.
Good job, Noogie. Already a valuable contribution from the Lost Ark streamer. I
Now
appreciate
you
it.
solved it. We can go back to full color.
I'm gonna fix myself here. There we go.
Oh, damn it. No, I have to contribute too.
Yeah.
That's it. That was my contribution. for
Noogie,
that.
Okay, so,
Noogie también es un
Rise,
streamer que
this
solo conozcan.
Forbidden Flame
Super
Jewel,
5
how
head.
good would this be in Lost Ark?
Excuse me? Are we doing a reacting? Don't we need to start the podcast or something?
I thought
Where
that.
were we
I thought we
reacting
started the podcast.
Oh, wow.
This is the podcast.
You've insulted me, Rise. I've insulted you. Chris
Oh,
has sat
okay,
there
I see.
awkwardly for at least 5 or 10 minutes.
It's-
As far as I'm aware, this has already started.
Rice está interpretando que
Yes,
si va a
thank you for your time,
cuando va a
Chris.
comenzar el
Hey
podcast.
guys, Talking Cat here. Hey guys, Talking Cat here, and thank you very much, Chris, for joining us today. Right, so
Oh,
Rise,
Dios mío.
how
Es
good would this
demasiado
jewel be
rancio este podcast,
in
me
Lost Ark?
encanta.
Why are you opening with that? It's a Pogger's jewel, Tarky. Thank you. There you go.
Okay. I need to get that out.
I'm
of the
like,
system.
yeah. Before coming on here, I was
Yeah.
wondering. I'm like, should I talk to Tarky? Because he's definitely gonna make this like very cringe. But like, to what capacity should I allow it? Like, how do I navigate this? But
Well, it's
no.
just no, because the thing which is good, and
jodiendo a
I
Rice,
always like
porque
to bring
Rice
the
estaba jugando
CEO
los
of
Ark.
massive companies into my therapy sessions. I think it's
Oh,
good. We've
Chris is
cleared the
here.
air now. We've cleared. Everyone's on the same wavelength. So with that, Chris, I'm gonna make this jewel go away now. I feel like everyone's had their fun with it. Thank you very much for coming on. Let's start off by reflecting a little bit on 317.
Ok.
Van
Van a reflexionar un poquito la
the
3.17.
biggest successes of Siege of the Atlas.
El mayor éxito de Siege of the Atlas.
I think the endgame stuff was received really well. The new bosses in Atlas Tree definitely achieved their goals, and to some extent, I think that it was controversial at the time, but removal of regions certainly like helped simplify the conceptual burden.
Dice que lo que,
Quite a
más,
lot.
lo que
You know,
sienten
like,
que fue el mejor éxito
previously you had to
fue
manage
el
so many
reward del
watchstones,
Atlas
manage all the
y los
influence
nuevos
types per
bosses.
region. You had to care about whether a map you were running was in a particular region, and kind of clearing that away and having a different
El nuevo
approach
endgame.
appears to have helped a lot, and I think that's a big success. And there's another more subtle thing, and that's to do with the shape of the progression in the endgame. And one thing that a trap that we fell into in the past was trying to have big power gains that occur very late in your character's progression, like having it so that the fourth labyrinth was one that you get really, really, really late. And to some extent, that's quite a lot of feel bad. And so we've realized that a more diminishing returns approach, where you get more of your progression front-loaded as you get to maps, rather than spending ages setting up your atlas.
Ok, dice que también una cosa que hicieron fue que obviamente las cosas son más fáciles de conseguir o más rápidas de conseguir. Por lo tanto, vas a sentir como que ganas el poder más rápido y ya cuando estás en el endgame ganas menos poder a medida que vas avanzando. Que a ellos les parecía que eso era algo controversial, algo negativo, y se dieron cuenta de que esto es lo que más le gusta a la gente.
Yeah, I mean on the development team. It was certainly old news by the time we announced it to the players, so we were pleased that the players liked it at the time and understood why.
Right.
When you have those like internal like debates on that,
No hay drops necesariamente, no.
Like, how do you guys present and work through that stuff to then get through it?
We try to identify what the core goals of the system.
Cuando presentan cosas como quitar las regiones del Atlas, ¿cómo lo hacen? Dice, lo importante de ellos es descubrir qué es lo divertido, qué lo hace divertido, y si podemos hacerlo de alguna forma más divertida.
To some extent, every time we design a league, we're asking people to trust that it's good, and this applies to revamping certain, mechanics like a new endgame.
Y generalmente lo que hacen es como que confían en nosotros de que esto va a ser bueno. Si es algo que nos gusta bastante.
I think we shifted our core goals a little bit with this. As was identified in the Q&A with Ziggy last week, we're trying to give a lot more player agency at the moment in the end game. So it's an intentional shift as opposed to redefining what we were trying to achieve all along. And that experiment has been working out well, as we discussed.
Dice que ellos no pensaban darle tanta agencia a los jugadores para que puedan elegir las cosas que quieren hacer. Y decidieron ahorita hacer como este experimento y está funcionando y creo que van a hacer más de eso. Y me parece que es algo positivo.
Do you have like any other places in the game where this might have some relevance? Like, have you thought of any other place outside of this, like, because PoE has gotten very
no, que pregunto si hay algún otro lugar en el juego donde hayan pensado hacer esto.
No, exactly.
We kind of feel that, like, you've got a limited amount of time, 91 days for a league that you're going to be playing 16 hours a day aside from sleep. And you've got that's a lot of time to do everything. So you have to focus on what your end game is. Like, is your end game doing delve? Is your end game joining a guild and role playing? Is your end game sitting on the trade site and just trading all day? There are so many different ways you can play PoE, and it doesn't have to be everything to everyone, as long as each one of those is a fulfilling experience. So, I mean, that's partially related to the endgame thing here. Is provide many.
Chris está diciendo de que todo depende de cada persona. O sea, generalmente el endgame de alguien puede ser en Delph, otro puede ser tradeando, otro puede ser haciendo roleplaying en un guild. Y eso depende de ti. Y la idea de ellos es que traten de ayudar a cada una de esas demográficas para que hagan lo que quieran de la mejor forma, de la persona que sea más divertida de hacerlo.
Since you say you want something for like every kind of player, do you worry maybe that if you keep pushing endgame, people might get lost on that journey, or?
Ya que van a poner tanto endgame todo el tiempo, ¿sientes que algunos jugadores se van a perder en el camino? Con demasiadas cosas en endgame.
And the players have played it. Like, it's very rare to actually get a new player who starts Path of Exile fresh in 2022. Pretty much every new player is a returning player. And because of that, everyone's had some degree of experience with endgame to some extent. And so,
interesante.
When we target the end game, it's targeting like 80, 90, 95%.
Dice que la enorme mayoría de los jugadores no son jugadores nuevos, son gente que ya ha jugado Path of Exile alguna vez. Por lo tanto, todo el mundo ha jugado algunas cosas del endgame. Y por esa razón, todo el mundo está como dentro del 1% de Path of Exile.
86% of our monetization comes from endgame players. Obviously, we don't want to do something that hurts people that aren't at the end game yet, but I think focusing on the end game is one of the better places to focus. If we release an expansion that just
y está diciendo de que, sabes, nos damos cuenta de que la mayor parte de la monetización viene de gente que está en el endgame. Y dice que la idea no es hacerle daño a las personas que no están ahí, pero la mayor cantidad de las personas quiere llegar a ese punto. Y ahí se empiezan a divertir, donde pierda la mayor parte del tiempo. Por lo tanto, siento que si nos vamos a enfocar en algo, eso se vuelve un buen lugar para enfocarme. Estoy de acuerdo. Oye, cuando me toque mi turno, le pregunto algo, Ribu.
Like, I know this has been like a very contentious question for so long.
I understand that once you've played the campaign a number of times, it's
Estamos
less
hablando de la
exciting to play
campaña
the campaign each time. And thankfully, there are leagues.
y
You
que
know, you can play league
apesta
contents with a bit of a
hacerla
different
por 20.000
experience. And
vez.
ideally, you know, in leagues where we're also doing meta changes, you'll also ideally be playing some new experimental builds. So those are things that mitigate it. But yeah, I'm sure the 100th time you play through Path of Exile's campaign, you're kind of gritting your teeth just a little bit after having done it so many times. The problem is, by letting people bypass the campaign, that's a genie you can't put back in the bottle, right? We have plans to make Path of Exile 2's campaign far more dynamic, far more interesting, just better, right? I've ranted a few times about how its campaign is,
Ok, está diciendo de que si te dejamos hacer un bypass de la campaña, de que simplemente puedes pasártela después que ya llegaste ahí por primera vez o lo que sea, eso es como un genio que una vez que sale de la botella no lo puedes volver a meter ahí dentro. Por eso estamos trabajando en la campaña de Path of Exile 2, ya he hablado de esto antes, va a ser muy dinámica, va a ser mucho mejor, va a ser mejor en todos los aspectos posibles. Y ese es el experimento que estamos intentando por el momento.
That's one of the reasons why we don't want to encourage people to skip the campaign. Having said that, certainly engaging with leagues give you a big burst of experience and itemization. Like, to some extent, playing the campaign is rather quick nowadays because you can just engage with some league stuff, get a pile of rares, equip your character, burst through. If you know what you're doing.
Y dice que las ligas ayudan a mitigar un poquito lo fastidioso que es la campaña para algunas personas, porque las ligas te proveen con un montón de poder, te equipas algo rápidamente y puedes atravesar eso.
Asking, could we maybe see more interesting leveling uniques shaking that up? And in the past, when we've had very powerful leveling tools, like maybe certain like overpowered delve or low level modifiers, they've been nerfed. With that in mind, what's your thought process on people having that super twink setup, which they won't have at league start? That's like a second, third, fourth build sort of setup.
Esa no me pregunta.
I love the idea of a player's second character being much faster, right? The idea of finding unique and saying, sweet, I'm going to play a second character because I'm going to have a great experience is an awesome thing. The reason why we've nerfed stuff in the past is usually because it's unintentional and a bit too good. Like, we're happy with you playing at 200% power, but if it's 1200% power, that's probably an issue. So hence the nerfs to stuff that were unintentional. But I do like the idea of having twink stuff. Now, of course,
Chris dice que está de acuerdo con tener algo twink, o sea, algo como que tu segundo personaje tiene, sabes, las botas de más velocidad y eso. Dice que para ellos, si tú estás jugando al 200% del poder, para ellos está bien. Pero si estás jugando al 1200% de poder, tal vez eso es demasiado. Y por eso hemos nerfeado algunas cosas.
With that in mind, you've had a really big push on chase uniques in recent expansions. How has the perception been from a reveal point of view when you've had such hyper powerful uniques compared to previous leagues?
I mean,
¿cuál ha sido la percepción de ahora en adelante que han puesto tantos únicos poderosos?
And people spam 1C because they haven't necessarily like actually considered the item. It's funny, but then they have a duty to spam 1C in response to that. Chazi wants your unique, etc. Now, what's interesting about that particular reveal was, okay, so Call of the Void is the ring which does all the chilling behavior that we revealed. And initially, this thing came in with a level requirement that was high. Like, I don't know, it was like 80-something. And so I was looking at it and said to the team, hey guys, why is the level requirement high on this? Like, it's fine on a low-level character because it scales with the rest of your character. This could be low level. And so we dropped the level requirement down to 16 because that's about the point that the ring could be worn without causing any balance issues. You could take this and technically twink with it, even though it's an endgame item you're getting from uber-pinnacle fights quite infrequently. And to some extent, that's one of the reasons why players look at it and see we're announcing a level 16 item and say, I don't care. Even though we've taken a level 86 item and said, why not use this on a low-level character as well, because technically it works. So it is interesting to see expectations that come from things like what the level requirement of an item is.
Está hablando de que del nivel de las cosas y que algunas cosas tienen que tener cierto nivel porque si no serían demasiado poderosas y caen en el problema de lo que estábamos hablando, algo de los únicos. Pero no fue tan importante. Fue interesante, pero no fue importante.
Like in the leveling progress or like rewards throughout the leveling progress, giving you like kind of cool things to build on, maybe class-specific, time-based, or anything like that?
It's a great question, actually. Should we be giving uniques out for leveling? Now, we do in the special events, of course, and that's partly because...
Alguien está preguntando por qué durante la campaña no nos dan algo que sea cool, que dure un tiempo, que sea algo específico de una clase, que sea un único.
In one of those special events,
para
it's
más rápido,
because we didn't have time or inclination to actually do a system that works by itself. And we give unique jewels out in the campaign at the moment, and that's actually a problem. It kind of subverts the intention of what a unique is. It's meant to be that you're plundering some ancient tomb and you find a unique item from Legends, as opposed to the dude in town's got a bag full of them, because uniques are everywhere. And so we were recently working on an itemization system for 3.19, and this involves uniques. And the question is, do we give these out as quest rewards or not? And we had to do some significant design work in order to not just hand out quest rewards, but to still make sure that there was accessibility of the stuff we're trying to achieve with that system. And so, to answer your question, yes, I would like quest rewards to be more interesting. I like the idea of you completing a quest and getting a burst of power. It
Chris,
helps with the
en
twinking.
resumen,
You know, it's feel goods all around, but it probably
le
won't
gusta la
come
idea.
from unique items in the future.
Le gustaría que hubiese más cosas como esas que sean de mucho más poder, pero no quiere como que reducir lo que significa un ítem único.
Bleed into the story and tutorialization. Like you could give a piece of gear that has a fractured life roll, or you could give an essence or two, since those guarantee a certain mod, or an orb of binding. So depending on how fluid you want to be with allowing certain other League mechanic content to seep into the main story, like that, you could get around it and not need to have it be neat.
¿Sabes? En lugar de darte un ítem raro o algo así, ¿qué tal si darte una Binding Orb? Darte algo que esté fracturado con vida, por ejemplo, o algo así. Que sea útil, pues.
You say that with Path of Exile 2, you want the leveling in the campaign to be more dynamic and more engaging. Could there not maybe be an argument made? I know obviously once you give something, it's hard to take away, to maybe have a league where you really do mess around with the PV1 campaign rewards as like a soft run for maybe PV2 systems?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly something to consider, and I do think that the more a league can play into the
algo para considerar
the more well received it is.
Que tal vez jugar con cosas de la campaña en PoE 1 para tomar data de eso y tal vez cambiar algo posiblemente en Path of Exile 2.
To be fair, though,
o sea que puede que haya cambios en la campaña.
It's not like the old campaign is going away. And from the sounds of it, most of the monetization and everything is coming from the end game players, like you said yourself. Does that mean that you've kind of maybe almost given up a little bit on like the newer player experience or the first time experience going from through the first campaign?
The good news is that we recognize that the campaign is a filter. At least with PoE 2, we want the campaign to be more streamlined. Like there are places in the current campaign where we see players like Act 3 is complicated.
Si ellos más o menos se rindieron con la experiencia de un nuevo jugador, ya que dicen que la mayor parte del dinero viene del endgame y todo eso.
¿Qué onda? I could rant for a while. As I've mentioned about that. So we do want the campaign to be good, because while the players at the end of the game monetize, they have to get to the end of the game in order to actually, you know, get that invested in a character that they want to dress up to that extent.
Chris dice,
and plus, 14% of our revenue coming from users who are not in the end game is still a considerable amount. If we lost that revenue, that's a significant hit. Like, it's one of those things where you've got your 100% revenue and your operating costs at like 50 or 60% of that. And so to take a 14% hit, you're losing like a half or a third of your actual profit.
Okay.
And so certainly we wouldn't want to.
Básicamente están diciendo
so
como que
right is very important.
Sí, o sea,
plus,
la nueva experiencia de jugadores es muy importante. Aunque nada más un 14% es muy importante porque ellos realmente están operando como con la mitad del dinero que reciben, por lo tanto perder el 14% es como perder un tercio casi de todo su dinero. Pero la idea de el Path of Exile 2 y la campaña Path of Exile 2 es que sea más fácil los actos, pero que sea como más simple, sea como un filtro nada más para que llegues al final y puedas disfrutar del endgame, que es lo fuerte.
It's a question of resources, of course, as to how fast.
Sí, bastante todo la regla.
Like, it's actually a lot of work. I mean, it's tricky because it's not really like remaking the acts per se. It's more a matter of like just getting the balance right. But to do that involves putting skills on monsters and reevaluating stuff. And our intention is to work through the acts and do it. It's just that I would rather be spending some attention at the moment on making sure we deliver high quality leagues, getting like players of us for new skills after the Sentinel release. Fair enough, right? Like as soon as we see opportunities to do skills that add to the game, we'll definitely be working on those. And getting a skill right is like half the effort it takes to get the balance right in an act at the moment, just because skills have so many interactions. So it's
Okay.
pretty much any question you ask on the podcast could be answered with this is a question of time and resources. And so it could be phrased as, why do you choose to prioritize this? And I think that's a great discussion point for some of these things where
Estaba
maybe we're
hablando
not
como que, mira,
prioritizing
o sea,
something that would actually
obviamente
benefit
es
players,
súper
and
importante para nosotros
choosing
que
whether to
todo el juego sea
prioritize the
bueno,
actually works
pero
is-
ahorita como el
is a
enfoque
good
es el
question, right?
endgame.
I personally
Y,
feel it's kind of a
por
second
ejemplo,
priority
le han
to
dicho
some people
últimamente de
right
que
now.
quieren nuevas skills, porque ya son 6 meses sin
This
skills.
is going back like
Y
maybe
es algo como de
couple
tiempo y
of
recursos, o sea, si nos
thoughts.
enfocamos en algunas cosas y
But
otras cosas tenemos
the,
que dejar. No
Path of
obstante,
Exile
pueden
2
preguntar de
campaign
por qué
is
estamos priorizando
something you
una
are
cosa sobre
pinning
la
a lot of
otra.
hopes on for like resolving a lot of these issues, and you've mentioned that you want it to be more dynamic, and you may not be able to directly answer this question due to not having it developed yet or just not wanting to talk about the development of it, but how do you, because you mentioned in the current Act 3 you see a lot of player drop off because it gets a lot more complex, you have a lot more quests that cause you to go around from place to place. How do you make Path of Exile's 2 campaign more dynamic and more interesting on a replay without suffering that problem at every single turn, if it's not
This is tricky.
as linear?
Yeah, this is tricky because I don't want to speak to specifics of the Path of Exile 2 campaign prematurely, right? Like it's one of
Otra
those
vez te
things where I was
pregunta
saying
que
to you,
cómo
check
hacen
out
para
how this
resolver
stuff
problemas
works
como que
with a proper
ya he dicho
context,
antes
have
de
a
que
trailer, have a good
en Lacto
explanation, have
3
some
hay
good
mucha gente que deja el
examples.
juego.
People will say, that's cool.
¿Cómo
Whereas if
resuelven
I
ese
just give
tiempo?
some, hands in the air kind of
Entonces
explanations,
dice
stuff
que
we're
dice,
trying to
tengo que ver
achieve,
con cuidado
people are going to
porque
leave with
no
the
quiero
impression that it's not
liquear
cool.
algo
So,
de
suffice to say,
Path of
the
Exile
announcement
2
for that stuff will come in
prematuramente.
time about what we're doing to make sure that the stuff feels dynamic. But one of our core goals is making sure that the experience varies enough playthrough to playthrough that you do actually get engaged with it many, many, many times. And there's some cool stuff going on, right? Like, I'd recommend having a look at some of the, well, for those who are interested, have a look at some of the talks we did for ExileCon, because I'm pretty sure some members of the team went into detail about some of the randomization changes and stuff that we're doing, which will help the campaign.
Está diciendo de que
From a difficulty
está
point of view,
buscando
and then I
que
don't wanna
todo
spend
sea
too much time on the
suficientemente
campaign
dinámico
because,
como para que
obviously
tú
you're in a bit
hagas
awkward
varias
stage
veces
because
la
it hasn't been
campaña y te
revealed.
sientas como que es
But,
algo nuevo y
when
refrescante
there has
en
been
lugar
the
de que estoy haciendo lo mismo. Pero tampoco sea demasiado
improvements or nerfing on
aleatorio
people's
como para
perspective
que no
in
sepa
Act
qué está
1 and Act
pasando.
2, that's been met with quite a bit of resistance because there are
El otro
people
también
who
es
don't enjoy
pesado.
the campaign. I know that the version of PB2 we played at Exile was like tuned up for streamers and the most dedicated fans, but is there some concern that PB2's campaign is going to be considered too hard, so then people will like stay with Path of Exile 1, or there'll be that resistance of like, I don't like the campaign, even if it is better, why is this so much slower or harder now?
We, broadly speaking, want the 2 campaigns to be roughly equivalent in terms of the amount of effort it takes to get through them, so that players don't
La campaña de Path of
choose
Exile 2
one
supone
over
que va a
the
ser
other
más
when getting to
difícil.
the shared endgame.
Así que
I'd rather they
había
pick
personas
Path
que
of
van a
Exile
decir,
2,
¿por
and
qué
to
me
be
molestaría
completely
jugando
honest,
la
the Path of
Path of Exile
Exile 2
2?
campaign is a
Sí,
shorter
la de Path of Exile
experience
1
than
ya
the
la conozco y es
sprawling
más
10 acts
rápida.
of Path of Exile 1. Like, 10 acts is probably too much content. Now, of course, how big is an act, right? You know, the Path of Exile 2's campaign is a lower number of acts, but some of them do actually average to be a larger size. With regard to difficulty, it's not the end of the world if the campaign is a challenging game to play through, where a player can complete Path of Exile before getting to the end game and say, "That was I had some challenges."
¿Qué le está diciendo de que,
some of these
sabes?
bosses took a few
Para ellos
tries,
está
right?
bien
Like
de
it's, you know,
que
it certainly is difficult in
sea
places, and that's okay.
desafiante la
I think it
campaña.
won't be
No tiene nada de
tuned to
malo.
streamer
Para
level
él le parece
release,
bien
like,
como que diga,
you know,
sabes,
that's
este
where
juego me
challenge
tomó un par
leagues
de
come in, of
intentos
course,
hasta que
where
lo hice.
players get the ability to juice their difficulty a little bit higher by engaging with league mechanics at the same time. But I think we do want the Path of Exile 2 campaign to launch slightly on the hard side compared to the ease that people have with Path of Exile 1 currently.
Pero queremos que cuando lance por lo menos Path of Exile 2 va a ser más difícil que Path of Exile 1, y la idea de eso es porque queremos que sea importante, que se sienta distinta. Estoy de acuerdo con eso.
It's been like that for a while. I mean, I exaggerate slightly. There are still many new players. Like today, hundreds, if not thousands, of people are going to play Path of Exile who have never experienced it in their life. It's very difficult to get stats because every single day, tens of thousands of people register bot accounts and try very hard to do something. And we shut that all down as much as we can. But the numbers are there, right? Like, you know, trying to work out how many new players there are today is often a case of how many people have registered a bot account that they haven't logged in with yet to get banned. And so it's very difficult to give exact quantification, but I would say that anecdotally, the majority of people that are playing Path of Exile are coming back after a break, whether it's taking a league off, taking part of a league off, right? Like, you know, how many of you guys were playing like literally all day yesterday? Probably not all of you. You know, there's people who have taken a break and wanted to play Sentinel at its launch. So returning players is certainly something we're optimizing for at the moment.
Okay.
Does that change your
Estaba
approach
hablando
to
justamente de
PoE2
que
then as well? Or is that
de
like more
que,
of an
sabes,
opportunity to
saber
get a bunch
cuántas
of new
personas
players
están
in?
en una liga es difícil.
Yeah, we see
O cuántas personas
Path of Exile
concurrentes
2
hay.
is getting
Porque hay bots
like Lost
en
Ark
el juego.
numbers at
Entonces,
release. We're certainly
si
speaking server-wise to try to be able to cater
al principio de la liga
for
hay
7
gente
figures online
que
at once, which
pensamos
should
que
be
son nuevas
challenging.
y pueden ser
And part
bots
of
que
it's
simplemente están
because
aprendiendo la
everyone's
cuenta
heard of
después de
Path
un
of
tiempo,
Exile.
¿no?
I mean, Path of Exile
Pero
2 is
estamos
released as an
utilizando para
excuse to try
jugadores
it again.
recurrentes.
Like,
Mucha
I'll
gente
talk to
de
people
muchas
and say
compañías
to
no
them,
diría
"Have
eso
you played
jamás.
Path of Exile before?" And
¿Eh?
they say, "Oh yeah, typically played it back in 2013."
Obviamente hay
at
bots en
launch.
Path of
And that's
Exile.
important, the at launch part, because there's a PoE2 launch
Pero
coming up.
se nota de
And
que
then I
no
say to them,
hay,
"What do you think?" And they're like, "Oh yeah,
de
I
que no
played for a
son
while. I didn't like
tantos
these aspects. I did like
como
these."
no
So I
antes.
say, "Well, why didn't you play, say, Sentinel?" Because of course I'm constantly trying to sell people. And whatever reason they didn't like it back in 2013 is the reason they're not playing Sentinel. They feel that that's not the game for them necessarily, but they will check out Path of Exile 2 because that's a different game. And so once someone's decided Path of Exile 1 is not for them anymore, it's unlikely that we're going to get them back with a single expansion, even though when I talk to people about specifics of what they don't like about the
Que
game,
está
we've
hablando de que
literally addressed,
hay
like, people
personas
saying that it's
que
decent,
dijeron,
right?
¿sabes
Like,
qué?
it's been a
Path of
number of
Exile
years since
está
decent's
muerto
been a
para mí, yo voy a esperar a Path of
significant
Exile 2.
problem. People have cited poor
O
performance.
Path of Exile está muerto para mí.
You know,
Esas personas no estamos intentando ganarlas de vuelta. Porque esas personas ya decidieron que no van a jugar Path of Exile.
millions and millions of
Puede
dollars
que
in
Path of
investment
Exile 2
in the
sea
engine in the
distinto
lead up
porque
to
es
Path of
otro
Exile 2.
juego. O así
And
lo van a
so,
sentir.
there are a lot of
Pero
factors
nosotros
that
estamos como que enfocándonos en las personas que están que toman un break y vuelven generalmente. Eso es lo más importante para nosotros.
Look at how good the new melee combat is with our new like animation system with
Me
Rock
parece
and
que
various other
estoy
bits
de
and
acuerdo con
pieces.
eso.
We get the ability to basically take each of the reasons why Path of Exile is better now than it was, and to put it on a pedestal, and people won't be able to disagree with that. Hopefully,
It's fascinating to discuss the like problems that like a mature game like Path of Exile has. You mentioned another one earlier about like it being really hard to implement new skills. How do you deal with that moving forward, especially because PoE2 probably is coming with a ton of new skills, right?
So we designed PoE2 around being able to implement new skills very easily. I'll give you an example, right? Let's say we want to have a new melee attack.
¿Cómo van a
animation. Like,
hacer
let's say I have some,
para desarrollar nuevas cosas en Path of Exile 2 o en Path of Exile en general cuando venga Path of Exile 2? Porque eso generalmente es difícil, ¿no? Y que dice que diseñamos Path of Exile 2 para que sea muy fácil diseñar nuevos skills.
For every single one of the 7 character classes. Secondly, the rigs that we made were made by talented people, but in 2007, with 2007 tech, and talented people is a dynamic thing where you can certainly pay triple and get much more talented people in 2022. And so, long story short, it's very hard to do, for example, a new attack animation because you end up having to custom animate like 35 or 40 or 50 different animations.
Un nuevo skill hacerlo ahorita en Path of Exile 1 es extremadamente difícil porque hay que hacer un montón de cosas distintas en un montón de clases, un montón de animaciones. Todo eso es muy difícil. Mientras que en Path of Exile 2... Ok, en Path of Exile 2 estamos usando sin mocap. Simplemente es muy fácil hacerlo. O sea, literalmente hacen algo, va alguien que si con una espada hace así y listo, ya tenemos esa cosa, hacemos algo en la computadora y tenemos un nuevo skill. Es así de simple, sacar nuevos skills, nuevas animaciones, todo eso es muy sencillo hacerlo en Path of Exile 2. Porque cuando hicimos las cosas en Path of Exile 1 era 2007 con gente muy talentosa, pero era gente en el 2007 que estamos muchas veces aprendiendo de esto y era tecnología del 2007. Estamos haciendo tecnología de 2022 con gente que sabe exactamente lo que está haciendo y eso nos va muchísimo mejor. Por eso es que Path of Exile 2 va a ser mejor. En otras palabras, Path of Exile 2 va a solucionar todo una vez.
Summed up my life there. That's my identity as a human, is that problem.
¿Qué preguntó? Fuck, me lo perdí.
Backlog, it's okay. Path of Exile is a complex game and it's something we have to deal with. But the good news is with Path of Exile 2, because we're rethinking what skills and stuff should the game have. Obviously, as much of that as possible is good, but it gives us the ability to say, this thing is problematic. What would the game look like without it? And if we were to drop a thing from Path of Exile in a random expansion, there would be an uproar. But if Path of Exile 2 had a different corpus of stuff that slightly differed in certain aspects, that's understandable. It's a new game. People will have many other exciting builds to play. And so it gives us a chance to review things, find problematic ones, and also to re-architecture stuff in a way. Like there's a new skill gem system there. You know, it completely changes your relationship with 6 links because now you could have lots of 6 links on your character. You don't, you know, because the individual gems themselves are the things with the links and sockets. And so this completely changes a lot of how skills work in terms of you not designing around just having 1 or 2 super skills in your character. Now you can actually have quite a lot of heavily augmented stuff. And so it's a different ecosystem and it's being designed with full hindsight. So it's honestly a dream to actually go and solve some of PoE's problems in that way.
on the back of that, there's something like
Básicamente está hablando de
250
problemas de Paradox
active
1
skills
que
in
en Paradox
current
2 se van a
Path of Exile,
resolver.
saying maybe there's opportunity to cut or recall.
Bro, I'm sorry, pero todos están hablando de eso. De cómo Paradox Exile 2 va a solucionar la hambruna mundial y todo.
And also the same with having like old armor sets that now have to be updated for new rigs.
La liga se termina mañana, aparentemente.
You have to cut everything, and it's like, oh, well, I have this legacy skin or something, you know.
We're not cutting too much. Like, our general goal is to keep all the Path of Exile's content. A competitive advantage we have against other large action RPGs releasing at the same time period is that we have a decade of stuff that we can drop in there. But we are being careful to review stuff and, if necessary, to change how it works. Now, people's purchases will still work, right? Like, if someone says, I bought a skin for Fireball, and you've just removed Fireball from the game, and even though I made the purchase 12 years ago for a different product, we will find a way to make that right. You know, we're not going to say you're out of luck. We'll either give you your money back, we'll work out something for it to work on. There will be a solution to that. And this does constrain
Dice que
us. There are
absolutamente
cases
todo lo que hayas
where
comprado
we
de
solve
Paradox
things
Exile,
that prevent us
absolutamente
making a
todo,
change to
y
something.
todas las cosas que funcionan en Paradox
Which
Exile
is
1
just how you
se
do
van a
business, right? You
buscar.
have to do right by your customers.
Casi totalmente seguro que va a estar en Paradox Exile 2. Si algo lo cortan, si algo lo quitan y tú pusiste dinero en eso, se van a asegurar de que tú obtengas al menos el valor que pusiste por eso. Lo que me parece válido.
That stuff out. There's some automation, there's manual tweaking, there's updating physics. It's a lot of work, but it does mean that some cool armor set that you bought a long time ago or received in a supporter pack will be a thing that you can continue to show off into the next decade of Path of Exile.
So with that in mind, and 318 having no new skill gems, and we didn't see skill gems last
Puede ser, tía Palta.
is the plan that there's less skill gems in their more meaningful in preparation for Path of Exile 2, or is it like a resource allocation issue, or?
It's entirely prioritization, and it's easy for us to say the game has a lot of skills that's focused on other areas, but it's important for us to understand that many players want to turn up to expansion and play the new hotness, right? And so we get that, right? It's unfortunate we had 2 in a row where we didn't make skills. We actually tried. Like, we had a skill that got pretty close to being ready, but we're also happy to not release something if we don't like it, and that skill had too many problems. It would have been a controversial one. And it's probably for the best that we put it in a grave.
Es una lástima
but we may be able to make it come back later. Now, of course, our question... Yeah, well, we'll see. Nice.
que no tenemos
so we
skills
desecrate some
dos,
skills out of nowhere for our next expansion. And, we're
dos ligas
certainly
seguidas, pero
scoping
teníamos uno
319
que estaba muy
to
cerca
include
de
the discussion
que
of
lo
what skills
saquemos,
are appropriate
pero
for the
si,
game that we
para
can
si para nosotros no
add.
estaba
Maybe
listo,
if they don't work out,
preferimos
like,
que
if all of
esperar
them
un poquito
fail,
más.
then the answer is none again, but I'm hoping that's not the case. But we have some good ideas there that hopefully will see their way through the process. But I would rather not release skills for the sake of increasing the skill count. I think what people want is actual skills they can use. Because it really sucks to make a bunch of skills and then you look and less than 0.5% of players actually tried them out. Like, that feels pointless.
Me parece válido. Dice que
so with that in mind, since you didn't
se están tratando de sacar skills que sean útiles, que la gente quiera usar y que la gente use, porque se siente mal que te saques skills que sumados menos de un porcentaje de jugadores los juegues. Se siente inútil, lo cual es válido.
And secondly, the release of Lost Ark and Elden Ring kind of dropped a bomb in the middle of the player stats, so my nice curves are very difficult to interpret correctly and to work out what Path of Exile retention is, because there was a siren singing from the Lost Ark release. And, you know, certainly if I was actively playing action RPGs, if I had spare time, I would have jumped across to play some Lost Ark as well, because, you know, you want to play the thing that everyone's playing. So we'll get good stats of this league from the... get a good idea what it's like to have a really good
se viene otro burn
agency. We'll hopefully get a complete set of stats.
Diablo Inmortal. Está hablando de retención de la liga pasada, pero que es muy difícil saberlo porque los Ark y Elden Ring salieron en el medio de eso, así que es difícil saber, ¿sabes? Quiénes dejaron la liga por algo de la liga o por el juego.
That's a lot of
yeah,
things.
Go for it.
You can't. Okay. I had like one thing actually. I have 2 things. So first, there was the PoE2 in terms of like, so you don't want to do anything in terms of like changing anything in any like major way in regards to like progression for going through like campaign or like getting to maps or whatever, because a lot of that stuff is gonna come in PoE2. But have you considered what's going to happen in PoE2 when people go through their 100th run? Like, are you making preparations already in terms of like, what are you going to do?
Están haciendo preparaciones para cuando eventualmente estés en 100 personajes en la campaña de Paradox Exile 2.
Horizon, right? There's stuff, but I can't announce content for for future things beyond PoE2, because these are speculative features that we'll see how things go. But yeah, it's certainly on our mind. This is a
Pero dice que, que no puedes decir nada ahorita, pero que tienen cosas en la mente para solucionar estos problemas.
I'm lucky, right? So we get turning 40 this year, so we get a 35-year horizon there, and we just.
¿Una fecha para Puedes Exile 2? No, papi, no hay todavía.
Okay.
O sea, dijeron potencialmente finales de 2023. Eso fue lo que dijeron la última vez que lo dijeron. Pero capaz haya beta este año.
What actually happens when you introduce just a normal league into the existing game and people go through like a system that might be too complex at early levels, or like, because I feel like there is a bad league can have just as much of a, if it's not done right in the early stages of the game, like let's say you fix it over the next 3 weeks and it gets good there, but like, so how, what's like the...
Dude, nunca es inteligente, pero le cuesta como que expresar sus ideas. Me siento reflejado.
Bad leagues, of course, aren't great for retention, but it also depends what's going on in the end game. If we say, here's a bad league and here's some cool stuff in the end
Nada
game,
más en la parte que no sé expresarme.
Realize, I can skip this league and just, by that, I don't mean quit. I mean, they can ignore the content and play to the end game and have fun there. So to some extent, one of the reasons why we are focusing on in-game content is that a league isn't going to be for absolutely everyone. We're trying our best to make them general, and I'm sure we'll talk about
lo que preguntó Nugi fue alrededor, Chris Wilson es un genio respondiendo, porque lo que preguntó fue, o sea, ¿cómo haces cuando una liga no es para todo el mundo, verdad? Entonces, puede algo ser muy complicado al principio y que eso haya de retención después. Pero eso dice, obviamente las ligas no van a ser para todos, pero el endgame probablemente sea para todos o para la mayoría de las personas. Por eso es que pusimos un poquito más de peso en el endgame. Y las ligas que sean bastante generales para que la mayoría de las personas les guste.
For many people, the right strategy is completely ignore the league, play to the end game, get some progress there, get economic abuse going on, get a bunch of currency because they're the first to do something. Then take a step back and say, so how does this league work, and not actually touch it during the campaign.
Porque dice, hay mucha gente que piensa como que, sabes, no voy a hacer nada de la liga, voy a rushear rápidamente los actos, voy a vender algo, voy a abusar algo de la economía y un par de días después digo, ok, ¿cómo funciona la liga?
Does that, to backtrack a little bit, so both Scourge and Arch Nemesis were leagues that a lot of players thought could have done with like more further dev time, but it seemed like they got reduced updates early. Is that something which I'm phrasing this terribly, sorry, but is this kind of system in mind where it's kind of like, oh well, the end game's great, the end game stats are good, people aren't really liking the league, but it's fine because they can just skip that and enjoy the end game content?
In both of those leagues, we didn't see bad retention for actual engagement with the league itself. Like, this wasn't a disaster scenario. And it's tricky because, again, it's a resource allocation thing, right? For some leagues in the past, like
está hablando de algunas ligas como Scourge, donde algunas personas sienten como que la liga no fue muy buena y simplemente se metieron con el endgame. Y él dice que esas ligas que nombró, que fue Scourge, no me acuerdo cuál fue la otra, que no notó que había problemas de retención. A mí Scourge me encantó, me pareció muy buena. Salvo por algunos detalles que se pueden acomodar, pero bueno.
Or we can fix it, which takes dev time, and that either takes away from the next launch, which isn't great. Like, that's not a good cycle to be in, if you know what I mean. Releasing bad leagues because you had no time to work on them because you're fixing the last bad league. In a way, sometimes it's better to let a league be bad. Not that I think they were, but, strategically, and then do the next one well. Or the other solution is crunch and overtime, which we shouldn't be doing. And everything we do to the last league, if the next league is scoped to take the 13 weeks, means some degree of extra work for the staff, which many are happy to do, and we pay time and a half for any extra hours and make it optional and try as best as we can to manage overtime in an ethical way as we can. But the goal is still to have none, right? Like, in fact, like, people working on Path of Exile 2 at the moment.
Están hablando básicamente de cómo tratan a sus trabajadores, que es bastante bueno, que si estás haciendo trabajo de más, cada hora que hagas de más se paga el doble, y si es necesario, pero que la idea de ellos es no tener eso, o sea, porque no quieren obviamente quemar a ningún trabajador ni nada. Y es una cosa que básicamente trata de ver con recursos, o sea, si hay una liga que tiene algún detalle malo o algo que hay que acomodar o algo que hay que mejorar, si lo mejoramos, estamos quitando tiempo, ya sea de la próxima liga o de Puedes Exile, o
The other topic,
estamos
though,
haciendo
with
trabajos de
Archnemesis and
más.
Scourge is, to be honest, we didn't
Por lo
want to make
tanto,
any
es algo
further
que preferiríamos
changes.
no
Like,
hacer.
with
A veces
Scourge,
es simplemente bueno
we
simplemente dejar la
were
liga
happy enough with
como
where
está
the
y
item
trabajar en la siguiente
mechanic
liga
was
para que la
at. We
siguiente liga
understood the
sea mejor.
feedback, we get the feedback, but it would have taken way too much work to redo that. We kind
No,
of just filed
Castre,
it
estoy
away as
con Chris Wilson.
this is a learning for next time. We were happy enough where it was. And for Archnemesis, we made the UI improvements that we thought the league needed, and we didn't want to make any further ones. And I understand that maybe we communicated that poorly because we didn't really comment. We just didn't make any of the changes the team were wanting, the players were wanting. And that's partly because we were still keeping our eyes open to keep an eye on feedback, right? Like, you know, we were reserving our right to make further changes, but in the end decided not to. And I get that's frustrating. We'll have to make sure that we communicate more clearly about that if
y de los
there is
cambios
stuff
al
that's
UI
very
y todo
unlikely to
eso.
happen. We'll say that so people can at least drop it or, you know, make their thoughts known.
Don't you feel like philosophically that's not a great thing for the long term? You mentioned how people got turned away from PoE due to an issue such as desync in the past, for instance. So releasing leagues like that over and over, because I think to being a streamer, and as a streamer, sometimes it's better to not say anything than say something that's going to turn people away in a way. And if you do that enough times, those people will never return in the long term. And from what you mentioned, I feel like PoE 2 is kind of like the only solution to that right now. And PoE has always seemed like the game that everybody has always heard about, but realistically, not that many people play comparably. Do you think you've reached that threshold of like, you have this huge amount of players that have heard about PoE but aren't playing it due to maybe even us releasing too much content or leaving content in a state
tiene suficiente gente como para competir contra otros juegos similares?
I definitely think we shouldn't be releasing bad content, and I think that if we do, we should be fixing it. Though, of course, there's the previous explanation of our resources and making decisions about that. PoE 2 will fix some of these problems because it has a significantly larger budget. There's a lot more going on. It's designed for modularity. There's a lot more safeguards built in for this. And it will be played by a lot of people. And we have a lot of new players where, to some extent, new players will be less forgiving than our established community are. Like, everyone in our established community has a long-term
tengo más una idea.
Right?
Cada vez que sale una liga mala o una liga que tiene un problema que hace que gente se vaya, ¿sabes? Si lo comparo con un streamer dice, pronto voy a hacer esto o algo así, la gente a veces se va y vuelve, pero lo hace suficientes veces y la gente no vuelve. O sea, no piensas que decir que Puedes Exile 2 va a solucionar todo, va a hacer que gente simplemente se vaya y que espere a Puedes Exile 2. Eso no te va a hacer que pierdas demasiado público. ¿Qué tal si Puedes Exile 2 no es lo que esa gente esperaba? Entonces, está hablando de que ellos entienden y obviamente la idea no es no sacar mal contenido. Es lo principal para ellos.
had this giant influx of everybody hearing about it, and then people tried it and the league itself was kind of a flop. So it sounds risky to kind of like bet everything on this one situation.
We learn from each individual mistake. Like, we basically have the Bestiary mistake codified as you must respect
está hablando de que, ¿sabes? Ligas como Bestiary que fueron un problema y mucha gente como escuchó del juego, vino al juego y después como que no les gustó, ¿no? Y eso obviamente, sobre todo un jugador nuevo, es como que este juego no es para mí, más nunca vuelvo. En cambio, Chris está diciendo, obviamente, todos los problemas que pasan, todos los errores, ellos aprenden de eso.
What speed do the Sentinels tag monsters? And their entire design there is, okay, people are going to expect this to be very fast, so let's make sure there are tools that they can achieve that. And like today, for example, we're looking at alpha feedback about the rate of cast speed. But the Sentinels are making sure that's in a good place, and the speed clear players on alpha are definitely testing this out for us and giving us feedback on where it's at. Okay. And that's a lesson we learned from Bestiary. It's unlikely we're launching with that in a particularly bad place.
Okay, dice ya, por ejemplo, una lección que aprendieron con Bestiary fue tirar las redes. Hay gente que iba muy rápido y que mataba todo antes de que se diera cuenta y ahora no le puedes tirar la red a nadie. Entonces, eso es algo que no va a suceder más nunca. Pero no es con Sentinel. Están trabajando con gente que limpia muy rápido mapas para ver si Sentinel taguea a los monstruos rápidamente. Lo cual me parece muy bueno. De nada, Sugas.
I've been not 100% in the league mechanic, and I'm like, it's all right, they'll probably update it. I'll stop playing it and wait for that update, and then the update never comes, so then I just skip the rest of the league. And if I knew the update wasn't coming, I would have just kept playing. But
right. We don't have a philosophy of abandoning leagues. It's just that in those two particular cases, the things that players wanted us to do were not things we were willing to do, and we didn't communicate that clearly at the time, right? We left people hanging, they didn't know. And that was partly because we didn't have good news. And we don't like posting saying, we think you're wrong, sorry, we're not changing it. Because people can be very angry on the internet. Yeah. And we could post a long manifesto about why we think our design is better and so on and so on. I think it comes down to us just, trying to improve communication there.
Está diciendo que hay cosas que se quiere la comunidad, ellos simplemente no están de acuerdo y por eso no lo hacen. Y el problema es que no lo han comunicado. Tienen que claramente mejorar eso, pero no nos gustaría tampoco decirles, no estamos de acuerdo con ustedes, están equivocados, así que no vamos a hacer nada. Porque hay gente que se enoja mucho en internet. Entonces, básicamente quieren trabajar un poquito más con la comunicación, lo cual es una respuesta no respuesta, porque, o sea, ¿cómo vas a decirle no voy a hacer lo que tú quieres que haga en el juego?
Also motivate not spending more dev time to get scourged.
Yo prefiero que lo digan, claro y raspado. Creemos que estás equivocado o tal vez no ha sido, pero me parece que el UI está en el estado correcto y no me gustaría ir más adelante, tal vez, no sé, está bien que creen herramientas al respecto, no tengo ningún problema con eso. Eso es una forma de hacerlo, pero todavía me acuerdo de que Arnemesis tenía una hermanta que yo iba a hacer un video al respecto y el día que iba a hacer el video, hicieron un update que mató la herramienta. Me acuerdo de eso, todavía me acuerdo. Y eso ahí me dio rabia y yo no hice la herramienta.
Where is that time going? Because I'm assuming it's going towards something. You guys kind of sold the entire thing as hey, we're doing no changes for you guys, because you've been asking for a steady meta, no nerfs, and all this sort of stuff. But that time has to be redistributed somewhere, I would imagine.
There are certainly easy changes we could make in a relatively time-efficient manner to skills if we had a philosophy of wanting to buff some stuff, right? It's pretty easy to pick 5 skills that haven't been used for a while and say 40% more damage on them, have fun, guys, right? It's an afternoon and we hope it doesn't break it. So it wasn't really motivated by time that we were doing the balance.
¿Qué pasó con el tiempo que se hubiese puesto en el balance de los skills, en el balance del juego que no se hizo esta liga? ¿A dónde se fue?
That stuff isn't as scary as people are worried it will be. There has been a lot of stuff done that we actually had the luxury of being able to do well, in our opinion, for this league.
Ray siempre hace preguntas picantes.
Certainly didn't go badly from an overtime point of view. It's a league that's had enough testing. It's hopefully a lesson in a good launch. And that may be because we didn't overscope it. Like we said, guys, we're going to pick a manageable level of work here. We're going to make sure we've invested some time in some 3.19 stuff early. That system I referred to earlier, which has some unique items in it that I mentioned, is partly implemented due to the fact that we picked a manageable scope for 3.18.
To give a little bit of context really quickly to that as well. How long have you thought about that decision? Has it been we're doing it this league, or has that been something that maybe you've been considering?
Dice que básicamente trataron de hacer sobre testear y tener todo perfecto para la próxima, para el release de esa liga. Esa es la idea. Y que el tiempo a veces que tuvieron de más hasta lo invirtieron en cosas de la 3.19, que ya han mencionado algunas cosas con los ítems únicos, pero
and I'm going to cast some blizzards, and I'm going to find all the unique items at Mephisto, and then I'm going to do this, and I know exactly how it works because of static balance. And people lived their dream. They played it. Everyone I know had a great time. As far as I'm concerned, 10 out of 10 reimagining of Diablo 2, right? A+, amazing game, definitely play it. And it was just kind of perfect. And they left the balance alone, right? So 2.4 comes out. That's their balance patch. And that's cool. They made some balance changes. I agree with all of them. I subtly like the fact everything there is a buff. That's cool. Classy. And no one I know who plays Diablo 2 is playing, I think there's one guy at the moment who's playing that at the moment. It was less interesting to them. People loved the fantasy of, I understand what this game is and I want to try my plan for this release. And given that our game is relatively similar to Diablo 2, and we do respect very much the decisions made by those devs, we thought, this is another piece of evidence for us trying a league with static balance. It may backfire horribly, right? It may be that people need a fresh meta.
Básicamente dijeron como que, sabes, había momentos en Diablo 2 donde el balance fue mínimo. Prácticamente no hicieron nada en esto y hay gente que volvió y tomó y jugaron. De todas maneras aprovecharon su fantasía, las cosas que querían hacer y todo solo bien. Así que eso es una evidencia más para nosotros de que podíamos simplemente no balancear nada de esta liga, invertir ese tiempo en otras cosas y después tomarlo la siguiente.
So I made a video a couple of weeks ago which Bex wanted me to talk to you about, which was kind of saying one thing that I think would be really cool, because when we had the last interview in 3.15, communication was a big thing, but I don't think communication necessarily has to mean interviews like this. I think communication can just be
Exactamente. Y Diablo 2 no salió mal, exacto.
This is what we're planning on do going forward.
Y es lo más similar a Paradox Exile que existe.
Yeah, one league on, one league off, like maybe one balanced league, then like a system league, then balanced league, like system league. I think an alternating cycle like that works very well, but for that to work, I think it needs to be very clear to players that like we're doing this because this is what you're getting next, and then it's communicated like that.
Yep. Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, we don't know yet that we're doing an alternating thing. I'd very much like to reserve, rights to not do that.
No, you've confirmed the next 4 years are an alternating system.
Come on, Chris, commit right now.
Yeah. I would love feedback on this. After people have played 3.18, right? Hit the ground running in 3.18 with the builds that you know.
Chris quiere saber como que confirmación de parte de nosotros. Si puedes jugar a 3.18, ¿les parece que es algo positivo o negativo de vez en cuando no hacer balance? No hacer balance y que todo lo que funcionaba en la liga pasada funcione en la siguiente liga. Porque Chris dice que ellos no están como que pensando que van a hacer algo alternativo que alterno, o sea, como que una liga balanceada, una liga no balanceada, una liga balanceada, una liga no balanceada. Eso como que es lo que no quieren, tal vez no les gustaría hacer eso, pero puede ser que puede ser que eso ocurra, depende del feedback de las personas, de qué opinen.
Ideally that process would go a lot more smoothly, probably involving getting on some podcasts to discuss it, of course, but yeah, that was the big takeaway there. When we were pushing for communication, we've learned it's about signaling changes outside of the hype cycle, so players actually have time to digest them for what they are.
With that in mind, why wasn't there like a manifesto around the arch nemesis mod pool? Because I think that's one of the things I'm most excited for, but that's a massive change to Path of Exile, not for this league, but like going forward, and it seems kind of weird the way that was sort of like just tacked into the 3.18 announcement.
Porque no hubo un avance de lo que iba a pasar con Arch Nemesis y los mods. Porque Tarky sé que es lo que está más emocionado, pero es un cambio gigante para los Exile y estoy de acuerdo.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We decided we wanted to fix monster mods because they were a washed out pile of random things you can't read during combat, which didn't have any impact. Like, you wouldn't really care what the monster had unless it had a specific nemesis mod or soul eater or something. Otherwise, it's just a bag of stats. And so we decided, what would be cool? To have mods that people can fear, mods that people can respect, mods that are easy to see at a glance, that do something impactful, and actually do the mods properly. And so we were working on this. We were making our mods, and we needed a league. And Mark suggested the brilliant idea of having a league which involved players learning about the mods, so the process of creating them through recipes, so they can have an introduction to them and learn about their power. Ideally, in a way that's compelling, that has progression and good rewards and so on.
Están hablando de por eso se les ocurrió hacer Arch Nemesis. Tenía ese problema. Hay demasiados mods que no significan absolutamente nada y a veces algo te mata que no puedes ni siquiera leer porque el combate es demasiado rápido. Entonces se les ocurrió esta liga en la que podían simplemente tener algunos mods particulares que la gente pudiera aprender porque literalmente los está creando. Y algunos pueden tenerles miedos, algunos no. Y eso ayudaría a resolver el problema que tenemos.
Once something becomes a secret master plan that we want to announce, we kind of do hold that off until, like, we have secret master plans in the future that I'd love to talk about, that I'm waiting, because there will be a right time. Fun things, good, positive things. But there are certainly things that would be lovely to foreshadow about. It just unfortunately creates a lot less interest in them.
Algunas cosas que hacen son como planes secretos maestros que prefieres como que dejar que vayan corriendo su curso y después simplemente lo revelan. Porque si dices todo lo que vas a hacer al principio, puede ser como menos divertido de como decís, das la sorpresa más adelante. Estoy... bueno, de acuerdo.
I think you already got rid of midway through Arch Nemesis League, the one which turns off Leech. That modifier was changed, but things that will turn off the ability to gain flasks or drain flasks, things that will turn off mana regen, that sort of thing. Do you think that binary mechanics like that have a place in like general?
También está hablando acerca de las mecánicas binarias como te quita la regeneración de mana, te quita el Leech, te quita la velocidad de movimiento, cosas así pues.
I believe
eso debe existir en Path of
Exile experience is that you can handle the maps you're doing. But while you're handling the maps, there should be combinations of random elements where 2 or more things come together that wake you up. So it should be that you know each mod individually you can do, but when there are 2 mods, that's interesting and dangerous. Now, if you can't deal with a lack of leech, or you can't deal with complete immunity to something, then it sucks that you keep encountering this. So ideally, it'll be a pair of things together that makes a situation you can't deal with, because that way it's A, interesting, B, infrequent, and C, something that you can have a mitigation for you don't have to use too often.
Lo interesante de Puedes es cuando estés haciendo mapas que de vez en cuando te consigas mods que no importan y que puedes lidiar con ellos, pero en algún momento te consigues a 2 mods juntos que te cuestan lidiar y por lo tanto te despiertan en ese momento. Eso sería cool, pero no va a ser kill en la que
based on a cool interaction and no one was angry because it was smart.
En la
and we want smart, interesting things to occur.
Simplemente agarre y te desactive tu build ya no funciona. Eso no sería cool. Por eso, lo interesante sería tener algo que sería... que es como, por ejemplo, lo que pasó a Kripparrian, que Kripparrian tenía uno de los personajes más duros de hardcore y los mejores jugadores de hardcore ever en Puedes Exile. Y estaban en un party súper bien armado y todo. Y un boss que explota cuerpos, explotó el cuerpo del otro boss y mató como a 4 personas al instante, que fue lo que pasó en Maven el otro día. Entonces dice, ¿sabes? Eso es interesante, eso es cool, pero no queremos que algo como eso pase cada 8 segundos.
Under the monster a long paragraph about what the mod does, it's probably the wrong place for it because it's not easy to see at a glance. We need to use icons or colored keywords pretty much. So then there's the question of, ideally, the mods are visible through what they do. Like if the mod puts an ice prison around you, ideally you see ice prison and an ice prison appears and you think, that sucks. Okay, I get it. If it's confusing,
la idea de los mods es que sea algo que sea con color y con palabras muy claras. Por ejemplo, si el mod se llama prisión de hielo y se hace una prisión de hielo alrededor tuyo, tú dices, eso apesta.
So if you remember a few weeks ago, there was a Warcraft streamer called Preach who tried out PoE and he did the whole thing blind. And one moment that I found the most hilarious of the whole thing is he was trying to work out what power charges did. So he opened up the help menu and he's trying to go through the in-game index, and there's stuff in the in-game index which hasn't been updated. So I think, for example, Arch Nemesis mods, that'd be a great place to put it, because there are a lot of people who already feel like they're very dependent on third-party wikis, but when there are like in-game help menus which have been there and then they're not up to date or they don't explain things clearly, that's a big problem, obviously.
Yeah, it's tricky with the in-game help thing.
Dice que el problema de la ayuda en el endgame es que no todo el tiempo puede mostrar las cosas muy grandes porque si no cae en el mismo problema que antes. Pero tampoco se siente bien cuando tienes que ir a una website externa para poder entender qué está pasando en el juego.
A lot of effort went into it, and then the real question, the conversations always go, well, what's the real solution? And the real solution is some type of browser in game to like an officially sanctioned wiki that we have checked and can vouch for the fact that it doesn't contain like bad stuff and incorrect information, and that's a whole bunch of work, so nothing happens. And I do agree that we should update the in-game help thing. The problem is almost no one uses it. Like I get that when he asks stream, and I haven't seen the footage of this, but I'm assuming when an intelligent person asks stream, how can I find this out? Well, the way to find it out is to look in the help system in game. So he opens it up and the cobwebs fall off. He might have been the only person to do that league. Like it really isn't used. People don't click help. And that's sad. Like it's there, and it sucks that when he wanted to rely on it, it was unreliable. But I reckon if we put the effort into fixing it, it wouldn't affect many people.
Dice que, o sea, él entiende de que hay un streamer que se llama Koho, que justamente estaba jugando y dijo, ok, quiero aprender cómo funciona esto, así que voy a dar en el menú de ayuda. Y ¿sabes? Eso quería una persona que está jugando con todo lo que te ofrece el juego. Y si nosotros pusiéramos el tiempo a mejorar eso, hay personas que aún así no lo harían, porque desgraciadamente es así como funcionan las personas. Y es cierto.
So how do you then balance that with Path of Exile is already a very dense game to get into at the best of time? How do you go about it? And obviously this must be a big thing for Path of Exile too. You're going to be getting all these new players. Where do you bridge that gap? Is there always just going to be this massive dependence on third parties?
Gracias, Herbie. Eso, papi.
We have a tricky thing with Path of Exile where the systems internally can get very complicated. If you say, okay, I want to understand what evasion actually is, I get the fact it means I don't get hit, but how? Like, is there a de-randomization thing, an entropy system? Where do I get evasion from? How does it stack with these various things? What can I convert it to? There's a book on that somewhere, probably in a wiki, probably in various build guides. Is it our responsibility to have that mastery information in the actual game client? Probably not, but it needs to be clear what evasion means. It means you won't get hit. And ideally, we name stuff clearly, we put it in an obvious place. Path of Exile is a game where you click on a monster and your character walks over there and takes a hit. And you can get moderately far, I mean, obviously not very far, but somewhat far through the game by just clicking on monsters. People don't equip skills for some, like way back before we had good signaling. There are players who would get through to Act 2 without using any skills because they just click on the monsters and they die. And maybe the Mervale fight was horrible, but somehow they made it. And so it's a game that's very easy to play at face value. The controls are simple.
Ok, dice, está hablando acerca de cómo funciona Path of Exile. Dice que es difícil agarrar y decir exactamente cómo funcionan todas las cosas, porque, por ejemplo, evasión, ¿cómo funciona? Evasión significa que no te van a golpear, ¿verdad? Mientras más tengas, menos chance tienes que te golpeen. Ahora, exactamente cómo funciona, de dónde viene, cómo interactúan con otras cosas. Probablemente hay algún libro de algún lado, alguna guía que lo muestre. Pero es importante que el nombre sea suficientemente explicativo como para que no tengas que buscar a densidad todo lo que significa. Y dice que, por ejemplo, antes de que te obligaran a agarrar skills y cosas así al principio del juego, hay personas que llegaban a pasarse el acto 2 sin equipar ningún skill, o sea, solamente con puñitos y tal. Y dice, probablemente su pelea con Mervale sería un asco, pero hay gente que lo hace, o sea, el juego es entendible aún si no entiendes la mayor parte del juego. Pero no debería ser como que suficientemente obvio las cosas que debería hacer, aún si no entiendes el 100% de esa cosa. Que así es como funciona la mayoría de las cosas en el mundo. Pero debería estar claro, si tú quieres buscarlo, cómo funcionan las cosas.
The default thing for a new player to do in Path of Exile is to click skip all tutorials. Get that shit off my screen. Excuse my language. And then they struggle with not having seen the tutorials.
You do have some sort of integrated tutorialization with a lot of the different league mechanics in the form mostly of NPCs. So you have Einhar shouting voice lines to you, telling you what to do. You have Kasha telling you what to do, or Cassia. I'm going to get reamed for saying her name wrong by somebody. But have you considered extending that sort of in-game tutorialization to some of the more basic mechanics? I mean, Kirak sort of, back when you were chasing conquerors, would tell you which region to go to and that sort of thing, but it's pretty light.
Está hablando de que, o sea, ¿qué tal si los tutoriales, en lugar de que sean un libro o algo así que te sale en la pantalla, que nadie quiere, qué tal si funcionan así como funcionan algunos NPCs? Einar te dice, hey, vamos a capturar bestias y cosas así, y eso es suficientemente explicativo como para saber de que, Einar es el que captura las bestias. ¿Sabes? Porque no extienden eso de nada más las ligas a otros aspectos del juego. ¿Cuál sería malo?
And this may have been violated. I'm sure people will find exceptions to this, but we try not to even refer to waypoints. The NPCs typically don't refer to the fact that you waypoint around. They're vague about how you get places. I think in one case there is an NPC that talks about them, but there are kind of things that are there because they're a trope of the game, but realistically they would make no sense in the actual game world for certain reasons. Respawning an instance to get the monsters back is certainly not something that Tarkale is going to advise you do on your way to the mudflats.
Control click the zone Exile. That was something which is quite interesting about the new Pinnacle bosses. Is in a lot of the new Pinnacle bosses,
no le gustaría como que arruinar su mundo de Path of Exile. Y entonces Tarky dijo, claro, que te dijeran, dale control click al waypoint Exile. Obvio, eso mataría un poquito la inmersión. Entonces tratan de eso. Y que, por ejemplo, creo que no hay... Dice que hay, creo que un solo NPC en todo el juego que se refiere a los waypoints. Eso es interesante.
Interact with the spheres or the orbs, I can't remember exactly, but Maven specifically tells you this is what you need to do. And a lot of previous boss fights have been very good, like Cirrus with die beams and audio cues. And then we had Infinite Hunger, which I think is just tasty. And it didn't line up with any of his abilities.
Supposed to get caught by an attack, then swim around. What is that? What is happening?
Está hablando acerca de los cues, como por ejemplo Cirrus o Maven, o etcétera, que te dicen qué hacer. Y después tienes como Elite of Worlds, que simplemente dicen, te dice y te manda a otro mundo. Y dices, ¿sabes? O sea, poner un poquito más de... que se fijen un poquito más en
eso.
eso. Lo cual me parece que los detalles de audio son súper importantes en los juegos. Después de decirlos me quedó clarísimo lo importante que es, y lo veo en todas partes, o lo oigo en todas partes. Incluso en juegos como Dark Souls, incluso en cualquier juego. O sea, el audio es súper importante para pasar información.
How about every time you kill someone with a mod, that mod gets revealed in a tab next to bestiary, and you can start having all the different,
esa es buenísima. Ese, por ejemplo, cada vez que capturas una bestia, la bestia se agrega a tu bestiario y te lo dice, ¿no? ¿Qué tal si cada vez que matas a un mod en particular, ese mod se viene y te dice qué hace ese mod? Eso está buenísimo.
My question basically is how many players will know to look there, right? So we talk about it on the podcast, and I say, let's do it, right? So then in the patch notes, we say, by the way, all the monster mods are in the bestiary. So everyone reading the patch notes may remember that. And then in the live stream, we're like, guys, some QOL. Now the monster mods are in the bestiary, to which many players will make fun of us because they're like, well, obviously we know what these do, Chris. They've been out for 3 leagues now. And so now they're sitting there in the bestiary. And for a new player who's playing the game and says, what just killed me? We could pop up a thing on the screen saying, to find out what just killed you, kill this monster and then eventually look here. But that's probably a bit further than we take it. And that's the issue, is if there was a really logical place where people would definitely look, then I'd be 100% for it. It's just tricky. The more time we spend putting cool UI that hides something away, it kind of adds clutter without solving the issue as effectively as we'd like to. So that's my concern here. I may be wrong on that one.
Está diciendo que, el problema de eso es que mientras más decimos que hagan algo, muchos jugadores a veces no lo hacen, sobre todo de jugadores nuevos que te mató algo. Bueno, ¿qué tal si quieres saber que te mató? Mata un monstruo con este mod y te vamos a decir qué hace. Le dice, capaz estoy equivocado en eso, pero sentimos de que poner más cosas en el juego que lo que van a hacer es como más clutter, más molesto.
This idea that players wouldn't want this, every game I've played where there's a log over like mods or bosses I can fight, I go there. Most people, like when I go to Terraria and I get a list of bosses, I don't know what they do yet, but I know there's something to unlock. I won't do it all the time, but I will immediately be drawn to that. Like these like unlocking of, oh, what does that thing do? What does that thing do? Like you can make it into like a mini game even.
Nugi, es lo que digo, o sea, Nugi a veces tiene unos insights muy buenos, o sea, tener una especie de log. Como simplemente llenar las cosas de ese log, o sea, puede ser como que, ¿sabes? Puede ser hasta como un minijuego. Hey, mataste esto, ahora desbloqueaste esto. Y tal vez no lo vayas a leer, pero sabes que está ahí, sabes que puedes ir a buscarlo en algún momento, aunque nunca lo hagas.
Things, my logbook of things that Okay, and is this stuff that you unlock permanently on your account? So once you've done it on one league, that information is there for the next one.
Es permanente.
Is that what you're wanting?
Probably, yeah.
Yes.
It's just like there's a lot of different mods and people. There really is so many, and you kind of forget. Sometimes you just want to like, oh, is it actually regenning, or is it reducing damage? Sometimes you can't really know. And just solving that gives you a tool to then customize your character.
Por lo menos dice, hay cosas que son como que ya se está regenerando o está reduciendo el daño.
The next question is, should this stuff be available all the time for players, like before they've encountered it, or is there a reason to actually block it off?
Está diciendo esto, de que, o sea, ¿qué tal? Doug está diciendo, ¿qué tal si hubiese algo como el bestiario? Pero cada vez que tú matas a un monstruo, ¿qué tal si tú haces, cada vez que haces algo en particular, te desbloquea esa interacción y te la dice en el bestiario? Como que mataste un monstruo con Ice Prison. Ice Prison hace esto. Cuando el monstruo se acerca a ti, crea esto. Y tal vez si lo matas 10 veces, te dice, esa vez no es exactamente cuando se acerca, es cuando le haces un hit de daño o lo que sea. O sea, eso sería cool y sería como que una especie de log que va formando y que durante el tiempo vas a ir llenando todo eso, y eso te va a dar como una especie de wiki dentro del juego a la que puedes acceder cuando tengas dudas acerca de algo, y va a ser como una especie de minijuego, porque tú quieres llenar eso, aunque nunca lo vayas a usar. Quieres llenarlo y tener toda esa información ahí. Prácticamente todos los juegos que hay los tienen. O sea, nombraron Terraria, Hollow Knight tiene eso también. No se me ocurre ahorita otro, pero sería bueno. O sea, incluso para alguien que diría, ¿sabes qué? Yo lo voy a buscar en YouTube porque fuck it, me parece más cómodo que alguien me lo dicte en lugar de yo leerlo. Pero sería bueno tenerlo ahí. A mí me encantaría. Monster Hunter, otro ejemplo, exacto.
Has that, like any keyword you type in there, it has that and a brief explanation, and that's been hugely helpful for it.
Right, so that's meant to be what the current help system is like, where it's got topics and all the things. Like it would have if we'd updated it, an Arch Nemesis one that explains what all the things do. The trick is we didn't update it because no one was using it, so that's the problem. That, like, you know, there'll be days where and I don't mean to make numbers up on demand, but it was low numbers of people that actually open it. Like I remember like 1 digit and stuff like that.
Keep talking, Chris. Don't let Tarky talk about Battle Brothers, please.
No, it's nothing.
Wait,
Mira,
does the current game
Chris está
guide,
diciendo
or
que
has
hubo
it ever
días
had
en
a
Arc
search
Nemesis
button and
donde
keywords, definitions
de
for
un solo
possible
dígito
keywords in the game?
personas que abrieron el menú de ayuda.
Because that's what I
Y sé,
thought.
por eso es que a veces no piensan en hacerlo. Porque cientos de miles de personas juegan, menos de 10 personas abren el menú de ayuda.
Is because it is a list of contents that explains concepts, which is some people will use that, but a very small. Yeah, you're right. I think a very small percentage of people use that, but players who like everyone from like a beginner to a really experienced player who just forgot what some mechanic keyword does and can't remember the percentage or maximum for chill, for example. Will use a system that is just like they can search the keyword and the keyword comes up.
So this is a glossary, I think, is the word.
Yeah, a glossary, right? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see any harm in maintaining a glossary of keywords, right? Like if it's kept to that scope of like, you want to know what nearby means or recently or, you know,
I wouldn't be surprised
various
if the devs use it while they're working on the game, because it would be a resource for them even.
The sad thing is, at the end of the day, the best way of making content to be embedded in a game is as a website, because HTML is the best way of doing stuff. And if you've got a website which you're embedding in the game, you may as well have it on the web as well. And then suddenly you're just browsing a website. And if you've got this website, why not have it be a proper wiki? And then you're using the wiki, which is fine, right? You know, having a wiki embedded in the game is probably a good thing for a game of our complexity, especially for, say, console players who may not have the ability to actually pop open a website at the same time in an easy way. And then it gets in the too hard for now basket. And so there's this creep of like, we could get a simple glossary sorted out rather quickly, but the second we try to do the feature the big way, it never happens. And yeah, I hear you on a glossary being useful there.
I would say
Dice que él entiende que es útil hacerlo, pero o sea, la mejor forma de hacerlo es meter un HTML dentro del juego porque es la forma más eficiente de hacerlo. Pero cuando quieres buscar cosas como hacen las personas por lo menos de consola, y eso es donde empieza a complicarse el asunto. Entonces, si quieres hacerlo bien, nunca terminan haciéndolo. Entonces dice que nos estás escuchando de que es importante hacerlo, pero o sea, dijo eso, no dijo pero, dijo, los escuchan que es algo importante. O sea, tal vez buscan alguna forma de hacerlo.
I feel like there's a very weird disconnect between I want to have clear visual mechanics and you shouldn't need a glossary because glossaries are too difficult, but then I'm going to keep designing very obscure, hard to actually track mechanics.
Yeah, we do try to make sure stuff as visual as possible. Our goal is, where possible, show it rather than say it. Of course, it's very tricky to communicate, you know, I just lost all my Flask charges as a result of this without putting an icon for Flask draining down next to you or something, which we could do. But then there's always the pressures of the fact that the person doing the effects here has 50 of these to do and has a week to do it in, and therefore they're done. And, you know, like some of them don't have the full clarity that they could have if we'd had more time to do it.
And then my follow on that is, doesn't this all just go to show that we're just very much in need of a UI overhaul? Because if we had a clear UI where we could clearly see our buffs and debuffs, this would be much less of an issue. That's why I was so desperate. I've been.
Question is like,
I would track it back a little bit because we gotta specify this because we're talking about it a lot. But to specify to like the current situation of what's happening with PoE, hearing all of these concerns, Chris, don't you think that not releasing the mods for the new Arch Nemesis stuff is kind of like a big problem? Like we all seem concerned about this. I know a lot of other people are concerned. I'm sure that much of what is the new Arch Nemesis mods, what the changes are, like that not being available anywhere, does that mean that there just wasn't that much effort put into it? Like it seems like a change that's bigger than, for instance, Sentinel alone to me personally, because you're engaging with that like half of the time you're in the map.
Está hablando de que,
o
sea, no siente que es algo importante. Nosotros, que no sabemos qué hacen los mods de Nemesis.
Stuff wasn't that we were trying to hide it. It's just that the people compiling it could be working on the game, right? And you know, it's being released in a week, and so inevitably, if I say to them, we need to have this list of stuff, and they're like, okay, that's going to take 6 hours to sort out, is then doing 6 hours in the evening, which I'm trying to avoid as much as possible. Now, that's not a good excuse. If I'm running my business badly and it affects the players, that's my problem, not yours. But I hear the fact you want the information, and I will investigate whether there is an easy way to get a broad summary of the changes that we're doing here. They were extensive changes and detailed, and it is hard to
para ellos es más importante los mods de Arc Nemesis que vamos a interactuar con prácticamente cada zona en la que estemos un par de veces, aunque sea, que Sentinel. Entonces,
sort of thing just going to get data mined?
It depends, and we don't mind if bits and pieces do. It's
Chris Wilson dice como que, ¿sabes? Eso es algo que tal vez, si se le pide a las personas que estén trabajando ahorita, decirles, mira, ¿sabes? Y esto me compilen toda esa información para poder mostrársela al público. Tal vez tomen 6 horas. Esas son 6 horas que van a hacer fuera del trabajo. Y yo es algo que quiero evitar lo más posible. Y Chris Wilson dice como que, ¿sabes? Hay cosas que no nos gusta decirte, quiero que los descubres, que preferimos mostrarte que decirte, pero ese no es el caso ahora. Queremos que sepas lo que hacen los mods de Arch Nemesis. La cosa es cómo
Some final props maybe
lo vamos a hacer.
on Arch Nemesis for you, Chris. Somebody linked to me today a podcast with Ziggy D on it from 2014, December 1st, where you literally talk about Arch Nemesis, Nemesis 2.0, and like implementing this overhaul and everything, and you're finally doing it. So it's kind of cool that it's been what 8 years and
wow, esto lo nombraron hace 8 años.
Word for word, you're doing exactly what you were talking in this clip.
Hace 8 años en un podcast aquí dijo que iba a hacer lo de Arch Nemesis.
You know, it's funny because that didn't come up when we were actually making it. Like,
wow.
The internet.
Qué loco, no sabía eso.
Yeah,
wow.
Super cool. I don't know. I thought it was
un poquito más de la edición cuando tenías pelo.
We had a system recently that we were putting in a later expansion where a designer came up with a system and said, "What do you think?" And my response is, "I want you to go and look in our like version control history and find the original design document from 2007, and then have a look for that system in there." And he's like, did you design this? I'm like, just have a look. And he comes back with like, "Oh my god, it has the same name." Like, there's some things that design themselves, right? Oh, and this is a system which is used in
Chris Wilson dice que él se acordaba de eso y que a la persona que estaba diseñando eso le dijo que por favor busque el sistema de controles que habían diseñado para los mods y dice que cuando lo trajo de vuelta dijo como que tiene el mismo nombre que pensabas hacer. Bueno, qué genio. O sea, diseñó Arch Nemesis 8 años antes.
Can we circle back to my mean follow up, which I did on purpose? But
the UI overhaul?
Well, it's just, I think it's one of those things of, I can understand the difficulties of maintaining a glossary.
You might rescue different.
Then keep seeing very difficult, unintuitive visually. And even if that wasn't the case, even if every single enemy was very straightforward in design, the UI has been holding players back for a long time. And I would say even more so since there's currently this big push where a lot of the top players are playing these extreme ultra-wide monitor setups so they can get more visual information just on a pure gameplay level, while pushing all of their information further and further away from the center of the screen.
Sorry, I just dropped out for a bit. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry.
From ultra-wide monitor, everything went static in like a robot.
No, that's okay. So basically,
le preguntó que, o sea, todos estos streamers, todas estas personas están usando monitores ultra-wide para tener un poquito más de campo visual. Y toda esa información cada vez está a los lados y es más difícil de entender. Y está hablando acerca del UI básico que existe hace mucho tiempo, que cada vez es peor. Y le pregunto a Chris Wilson.
The most constructive way of looking at the UI stuff is for us to treat it rather than a UI overhaul, which is a big project and has infinite scope and takes 2 years and stuff. But to look at it in terms of what QOL would be helpful here bit by bit, right? Like if players can suggest, I would like the buffs to be displayed like this, and I would like the buffs actually to be possible to put over here, or I would like the debuffs to be displayed in this way, or there should be a thing near your character that shows this, or the only way that I can get this information currently is to buy this microtransaction that shows it more clearly. We should have a default UI way of seeing it, or basically individual suggestions, preferably with mockups if they're interested. Those are very actionable, right? Like I can easily assess by looking at this kind of suggestion. That is an improvement to the game. Let's get it in. And you'll notice in this league, we did have a bunch of UI QOL stuff. Bex is teasing it out via the community team. Over the next week and so on. And I love putting that in the expansions where possible.
Estoy diciendo que, ¿sabes? Hacer un overhaul, o sea, un cambio completo al UI del juego es algo que tiene un scope infinito y que puede durar 2 años. Pero, ¿qué tal si tú me dices, sabes, los debuffs, qué tal si los mostrara de este lado, los mostrara de esta manera? Eso es algo que puede ser particular, que puede hacerse y se puede hacer relativamente rápido, o se puede dar la opción para que se cambie a gusto. Eso, si alguien tiene ideas de ese tipo y puede mostrarlas con un mockup preferiblemente, páselas, que si es algo que mejora el juego, vamos a buscar cómo hacerlo.
No, absolutely. That was my impression. First time I played on console, I was like, it's kind of embarrassing that this UI is so much better than what we currently have on our version of the game. Like the mana bar and everything. Like, it's just so much smoother being in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, I understand. Well, let's look into this, but I need more specific information about exactly what problems people are facing with the UI, right? Because if I sit the team down and say, guys, we're fixing the UI for Path of Exile, whatever they come up with may not exactly align with the types of problems you're looking with here, right? You know, like if we're talking about buffs and debuffs and clarity,
Chris dice
and,
como que, mira,
you know,
ok,
things
entiendo lo
related
que
to
dicen,
what mods are
pero
doing to
necesito
you,
un poquito
whether
más de
they're draining
información.
your
Necesito
flasks and
saber
so on. Those are the
exactamente
areas
cuáles son
where
los
we need to
problemas
talk
que
specifically.
estén sufriendo. Pero si yo le digo a mi equipo,
This is something that is
a
difficult
mi
to
equipo,
track in
mira,
combat.
necesitamos
So, yeah.
acomodar el UI.
I mean, I can summarize that. Like, generally, human beings look like this way, but PoE, you have to have your eyes pointing like this direction. So that's kind of like the overall summary of that, I think.
Dice que bueno, yo te puedo resumir. Mi problema es que los seres humanos miramos en esta dirección y con Path of Exile a veces hay que mirar en esta dirección y eso es como no humanamente normal. Entonces, si pudieran cambiar eso sería bueno. Y claro, o sea, los debuffs están arriba, el mana está aquí, la vida está acá, no sé, tus skills están en la esquina, los monstruos están en el medio, entonces, ¿sabes? Makes sense, pero bueno.
I'll officially announce here. We obviously want to make some QOL improvements in the future, and why not have some in 3.19, right? And so we'd love suggestions on that. It's always good. In fact, the way we do our QOL stuff, as I said to the community team, please look at the recent posts on the forum and on Reddit and stuff that people have emailed to customer support for requests for the stuff, you know, preferably ones with mockups, because then we can easily assess them, and give me the big list. And we took the big list and went through and said, well, that's easy, that's easy, that's easy. This is hard, but yeah, we can do it. Now, this is too hard, we'll do it later. And went through and just did a bunch of them. You know, the list started like, 30 things, 18 were easy to approve, we got 12, that kind of situation. So I would love to get QOL suggestions. Now, in terms of where to post them, the forums are great, include screenshots if you can. Reddit posts are good, especially because people can upvote them, and if it gets downvoted to 0, then we know people don't want it. And we will see these, like we have...
Wait, is that it? That can't be the way that you judge these things. Come on, Chris. Okay, excuse me.
It helps if it has community support for it. I'm just saying, if something's fully down...
I mean, for the record, this podcast didn't have community support using that metric.
What if like a streamer looks at it and he goes, "This is stupid," and now everybody downvotes it, even though it's a good idea? That's not good.
I understand. We'll probably still see the threat, right?
Mira, o sea, está diciendo como que, mira,
si
pueden postear en los foros las cosas que quisieran que hiciéramos, buenísimo. Pero si lo pueden postear en Reddit también es bueno, porque si vemos que tiene 0 votos, ya sabemos que es algo que la gente quiere. Y Reddit dijo, wow, o sea, eso no puede ser la forma en como, miren, o sea, este podcast no lo quería nadie, para que sepan, ¿no?
Which would be good to look at. So a big feature of the new World of Warcraft expansion is going back and updating their UI. So if you have any communication that might be interesting, or just observing how they go about it, because I think one thing about Path of Exile, and I think ARPGs generally, even some of the new modern indie ones, is the UI elements feel very much dated in like the classic RPGs, and it feels like there hasn't been much modernization. So whatever happens, I do just think having something which feels more modern, especially with Path of Exile 2 in mind, will be a very big thing, because as much as players like ourselves are really excited for a new campaign, a updated UI is probably going to be more meaningful to most players ultimately in the end game than a fancy campaign will be.
Yep, I understand. It's worth setting some expectations that changing UI stuff can actually be very time consuming, right? Like it has to work across a lot of different screen resolutions. We have to not only update it for console, but now that controllers are used on the PC version, we need the controller support to be available immediately. There's also versions where, like, we support versions in other territories that have subtly different things going on, like in, China and Taiwan and so on. So basically, don't expect UI stuff super soon, and please don't interpret this as 3.19 has to contain a lot of UI changes. We'll look at the QOL list, we'll probably get some in. If the 3.19 League or endgame stuff or whatever has tons of UI, that will constrain the amount of UI stuff. I have 2 UI programmers working at the moment on this stuff, and they may both be very busy with existing stuff that we need, but...
Okay, está diciendo como que, miren, es algo muy importante para nosotros, queremos mejorarlo, y que no interpreten esto como que la 3.19 vamos a acomodar absolutamente todo, pero, o sea, si hacen una lista, hay un montón de cosas que seguramente vamos a poner ahí dentro, y vamos a... Oh, ¿en serio? ¿En consola puedes levelear las cosas automáticamente?
Implement, because there's a couple things like that on console.
¿En consola puedes levelear las gemas automáticamente?
We haven't seen them for ever in PoE, and it's been like that for a long time too.
Do you want the technical answer about? Let's go with the technical answer here,
please.
So,
sure.
We store our database objects as very tightly bit-packed data structures that are fast and efficient to copy around. As in, C++ code can get these out of the database into memory, and it's fast, and it helps us have a lot of players online. They're not stored in sprawling SQL objects where you have the ability to add fields and stuff easily. And so adding properties to the way that items are stored and so on can be difficult if the item is full. And long story short, certain things require room individually inside the items. And one of the things on PC is whether or not you have dismissed a gem level up. Like if I right-click on a gem because I don't want it to level up any further, I don't want to know about it, that's actually stored inside the gem. Anyway, long story short, on console, we had things work differently, so we implemented things differently, and that enabled us to use some of the storage for something else, like, for example, the ability to have automatic gem level ups and so on. And so it's actually very hard for us to do this on PC because we're using the information in two places. This is like, for example, I think, and this is going back a while, in the Chinese realm, we had it so that premium stash tabs did something different.
Básicamente, la forma en que voy a tratar de resumirlo, la forma en cómo está codificado, los campos o las propiedades de cada cosa, en el caso de las gemas, están en dos lugares distintos. Por eso no pueden levelearlas automáticamente en PC.
We can't just copy the feature across because the slot that it's in is already being used on PC. That doesn't make it impossible, it just makes it thorny.
Dice que no es imposible de hacer, pero lo hace complicado y molesto.
So that you can then choose to level it up and feel good about the fact you've leveled it up is a positive thing in an RPG. We would not want to streamline everything so you turn up at your computer every day or look at your phone and see what progress you made in Path of Exile while you weren't there. And we feel that every step down there is one we have to very carefully consider. And the only reason we don't have manual gem leveling in console as the primary way is just that it is already very fiddly playing with a controller. And so these are various decisions made in different periods that are now causing
también
situations
a ellos les
with
gusta
a lot
la
of
idea de que tú tengas que levelear las gemas en
It's too vague, Chris. That's not going to
RPG.
work for the bingo card. You got to say the words, okay?
Porque
Use the W word. No, the weight of it, Chris.
porque, o sea, tú levelear las cosas se siente bien.
Absolutely, it's the weight of leveling.
There you go.
Thank you, Reyes. On the back of that, since we've mentioned quality of life and API,
Y Chris dijo, eso es demasiado vago, tienes que decir las palabras. Dice, nos gusta el peso que sientes cuando leveleas eso. Gracias, Chris.
Especially since PvE has become such a dominant part of how people perceive the meta and how people have started to use it as a tool. How feasible a tool is it to increase the ladder for that?
Oh.
Increasing the ladder is actually a little bit tricky because, one sec. Okay. Increasing the ladder is a bit tricky. The way we're storing it is efficient, but it means that there are limits to that. And we can potentially increase it. Like, it's not impossible to, it just requires some server time of the admins going and, working out how much we can increase it by. And this applies to things like let's say you got your friends list or your ignore list, right? So everyone says, I'd like more friends, I'd like larger guilds. And we could increase the number. We could take the guild size and we could bump it up by 20 people. Probably everything would be fine. The problem is the point where it's not fine, we'll find out because we have a launch and everyone logs in and things go very badly wrong. And the same is true for things like the ladder. What we would do is we'd increase the ladder. And I bet today, when there aren't that many people playing PoE because the launch is on the weekend, the ladders would work okay. It's just a problem where suddenly the ladder is slow and that slows down the ability for people to, save their characters or log in or something. And then everything goes catastrophically wrong. So, long story short, it's one of those dangerous changes. I know that people want to increase it. We may be able to
Dice que sí, hay alguna forma de tener lo que tiene PoE Ninja para que tenga un número más grande, porque a veces...
I wonder how many level 100s there are that people can still have the ladder be something useful. So I checked Arch Nemesis League. There are 750 pages, so the maximum amount of level 100 characters. 15,000. Like, it's practically a non-feature at this point in the league, unfortunately. Since it can be very useful. I mean, it provides so much information to...
Dice como que si hay una forma de hacer el ladder que sea más amplio, así la gente de PoE Ninja puede tener un rango mayor de de builds que pueden ver, por lo menos, para percibir cómo está la meta. Y Chris dice que eso es algo que no debería ser difícil de hacer, pero en el momento que hagan un cambio y todo el mundo inicia al principio de la liga, eso puede romper algo. Entonces,
you know what I mean? It just carries up. I'm not going to find superlative explanations all the way. But if you see a level 97 person running around, you're like, how did he get that much time? I don't understand. How did he get to 97? 98's unheard of. 99's impossible. 100 is a god. That kind of situation. Which we briefly achieved right at the beginning of PoE, where the first person hitting level 100 was a very big deal. And obviously, as you know, things gradually creep over time, now getting to 100 is just kind of finishing your character, and lots of people do it. Now, if we said, hey guys, it's hard to level now, we just cut the experience, that's disrespecting player time, and there would be a riot, and things would not go well. So step one, fix it in hard mode. Done. Okay, already done. It's hard to get to level 100 in hard mode. The people who play hard mode will be happy with that. The people who don't play hard mode will complain for a while but not play it, so that's fine. The problem is the base game. What do people want here? Because I feel the fact you can get to 100 too easily and there's no measurement of character progress above that is a negative thing. But the only way we have to fix that is either add more levels on the top, which seems weird, or nerf experience, which feels like it's literally handing pitchforks to people. So what do you guys think?
Está hablando de que, o sea, que ¿qué pasa a nivel 100? Y para me está hablando acerca de eso. Dice que él siente que, ¿sabes? Hay dos soluciones que se le ocurren. Hacer que bajar la cantidad de experiencia que puedes ganar o lo que cuesta llegar a nivel 100. Dice que eso para él sería darle literalmente tenedores para que se moleste la gente. O poner más niveles encima de nivel 100, lo cual sería raro. Así que, ¿qué dicen ustedes?
And that's not you don't really get that like with having killed Uber Elder. You don't get a public facing little badge that you completed the task. But I do think there's a lot of challenges at the very pinnacle of Path of Exile now that are quite an accomplishment to overcome.
Oh, esta es buena, Octavian.
Also having more, like, Scourge,
dice,
for example,
tú puedes agarrar ahorita y ver, pasar el mouse encima de alguien y tú ves el nivel 98, 99, 100, lo que sea. Y dice, sabes, tal vez eso no es tanto ahorita, pero hay un montón de challenges difíciles que pueden ser interesantes, que se muestren, como matar over content, etc.
The challenges in Sentinel are significantly harder than normal, as we've explained, so that helps a bit there. Like, we took the hardest of it and then stretched that out so that there's masses and masses of hard ones, which I think we're actually posting today or something, very soon. Oh, nice. So you'll get an idea for those. But that is one thing. But in terms of actual character level, right now 100 just means you played a bunch, you know, but not a whole lot. Like, how quickly are people getting to 100 in modern leagues? It's certainly not the 2 months that I feel it should take, you know. It's measured in days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, in software trade,
it's 2, 3?
Yeah.
Days.
Yeah.
It depends on the league.
I think there's a lot you can do, because like you talked about it earlier as well when it comes to, well, the further up in progression you go, there's diminishing returns, right? Once you hit 100, you've basically hit peak level of diminishing returns, meaning that you might not get power anymore. Now you just get prestige. So you could have like prestige point. Okay, I hit level 100 twice. Maybe it does nothing other than increase my character size by 1% every time I do it. Right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Or a title for killing.
Dice que tal si después de nivel 100 ganas prestigio.
Like Uber boss,
y
like,
cuando llego a nivel 100 dos veces me aumenta 1% el tamaño del personaje.
Add something
o algo así.
Players can get.
Yeah, some kind of other trophy.
Yes.
Un trofeo o algo así.
Yeah, we've considered things like title systems where you basically unlock titles within a league of things you've done, maybe even being the first to do stuff and so on. And
I mean, I remember
Chris dice que
a very long time ago we had
habían pensado acerca de un sistema de títulos. Que a mí siempre me ha gustado eso.
We talked about the idea of when a rare item is achieved, it says the item that
the
person who got the item, and you said, oh, that seems like a really cool idea of having a meaning, so that especially in like hardcore trade or even softcore trade at the start of League, you have someone like, oh wow, Grimro was the first person to get this item, and like, oh, I want to buy that one. And with these new Uber bosses and these insane chase items, that seems like it'd be a really cool metric, just to add that little extra bit of prestige, because you then have people who are like, I want to have my full, like, I got my headhunter with my account name on it, and I got this helmet off that boss with my name on it. People getting their own full sets. Like the silly things you see with people who wanted, like, full shape influence gear just because it looks pretty. Like, people clearly care about that.
Estoy de acuerdo. A mí me gusta
Yeah.
ese tipo de
And
cosas.
absolutely, these games
Dice,
are great for
Tarki,
the
por
kind
ejemplo,
of the
está
prestige thing, where there
mencionando
is so
como
much you can
ejemplo
do to protect your items
que
in the
hay
end
gente que
game,
quiere su completo
which is
set
good.
de Shaper. No
What
porque
I'm
hagan
hearing here
algo,
is
sino porque
don't
se
do
ve
any
lindo.
heavy-handed stuff with experience, because no one's suggesting that as an option, which is fair enough. I kind of knew that would be a problem, so we've got that earmarked for hard mode, of course, so that it's hard to get to level 100. But
Also,
base game probably is unlisted.
Just briefly, in case I confuse you, because apparently I confused chat. At no point did I say they should do NFTs. I think NFTs are absolutely trash. You can have cool prestige systems without NFTs.
Y se puede tener sistemas prestigiosos sin NFTs.
It's corrupted system.
Yeah.
I was going to jokingly do an NFT thing as an April Fool's joke this year before it was pointed out to me that there would literally be a riot because it's so not reading the room to even think that joke would be funny. So yeah, completely agree.
Dice que Chris Wilson dijo que quería hacer una broma en April Fool's de NFTs, pero me dijeron y que iba a ser muy malo, o sea, casi que no entendía ni siquiera lo que era un chiste en internet hoy en día, que hay gente que se iba a molestar aunque fuese una broma. Entonces por eso decidimos hacerlo.
And everyone was like, oh yeah, cool, go Chris. So if you then did the April Fools, that would have been a big like
been really funny.
Oh, I have a good rant here. So there's this amazing thing where a lot of companies want to use NFTs to have this play to earn thing, where they've got a game or a platform where as you play the game, you get currency or whatever it is. It's an NFT, you can trade it for real money. Just imagine you can earn money playing Path of Exile or whatever it is, right? And that's on the blockchain, which is amazing. The thing is, I feel that what they've done here is they've taken this concept of people can earn real money for playing the game, which magically comes out of nowhere because of blockchain. And then they're giving it to you on a ledger, which is, I'm not going to say designed for criminals, that's an accident, but very appropriate for criminals. As in, you can't undo stuff on the blockchain because it's a distributed consensus thing. And so with Path of Exile, people try to cheat. They run bots. They try to find exploits. And when they do, we take their stuff away. We ban the account, and their items go away, the spoils of their exploits. And if we put it on a blockchain instead, then we can't. In fact, the people that benefit are those that cheat. And so you get the situation where if you've got a game that's giving people stuff on the blockchain, the second they find a dupe, like right now, if someone were to find a dupe in Path of Exile, which is rare, right? People get close like once a year and we shut that down and we have sirens physically that go, oh, that's a lie. But I wish we had sirens if we detected duped items, but it's very rare for anything bad to happen. But when it happens, we clean it up completely and as fast as possible and ideally silently, and it doesn't affect the economy. But if the stuff's going on a blockchain, you then have the issue where you kind of can't. Like that guy who just duped it has completely ruined the game in one day because now he has all the things and no one else has them and you can't get rid of them. But then there's botting is another issue, and a lot of these games are done as single player games where they give you
todo lo que está diciendo es muy importante.
Single player, so it's running on your
Voy a
own
ver cómo lo
computer,
traduzco.
and so people can easily just exploit it with memory editing.
Estoy diciendo que, o sea, si todo esto va en la blockchain,
Anyway, I feel that none of this has been thought through at all, and the second it's actually battle tested, someone's going to have
está en la blockchain. Si alguien dupea un ítem, si alguien duplica un ítem de una forma ilegal, eso está en la blockchain.
Anyway,
y no podemos
so
simplemente eliminarlo, no podemos acomodar el juego.
This is my little rant about the industry.
No, I'm very glad you went on that rant. Yeah.
Y es básicamente eso, pero mucho más profundo.
Chris talked about this.
Muy bueno,
I don't know
muy
if
bueno.
we want to get into it right
Después
now.
del podcast, si me recuerdan, volvemos a ver esta parte y se las traduzco en detalle.
So, Chris,
para no perder lo que voy a decir ahorita.
750 pages, 15,000 players, level 100. Like, didn't that kind of like shock you to a certain degree?
People love our game so much that they'll play to maximum level and vast numbers. I mean, that's amazing. No, I feel that level 100 should just be a handful of people that have put the time in over the course, so they should be just hitting it towards the end of the league. But that's also something that, you know, to use the phrase again, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? Like right now, if we took away people's ability to get to 100 quickly, they would be seen as wasting their time. So yes, it does disappoint me slightly that that's the extent to which people that we give out experience freely these days. But what are you getting at there? So what makes you bring it up again? And what reaction do you want?
I don't necessarily want a reaction, but it's more like a philosophical thing. So basically,
Raiz quiere saber como una reacción filosófica acerca de Chris Wilson de que hay como 5,000 personas o 5,000 cuentas con level 100 actualmente en Artemesis, que si eso le parece raro.
Mode, which is supposed to be in your head this like true idea of Path of Exile. So to many people, they can interpret it as the current Path of Exile isn't what you personally see as something that you
lo más lejos que he llegado es la de 99 y fue esta liga.
Or maybe
yo 95 ya me estoy quedando
it hasn't turned out exactly the way that you wanted it to be.
I have two concerns with Path of Exile that cannot be addressed in Path of Exile without upsetting millions of players. The first is the experience thing, that you can hit maximum level too easily. And the second thing is you can hit maximum items too easily.
Mm-hmm.
The Path of Exile that we have at the moment, in a number of days, you can get, and the end game is bottlenecked by items. You can't do high, very difficult content until you have the damage to do it. There's very little need to be like, I'm stuck at some tier of maps until I'm capable of doing the next tier from a grinding point of view because you acquire items so quickly. The game spews forth thousands of rares in your face. You can acquire endgame uniques within days. This is a very fast process. And that's fine. That's what Path of Exile is, right? We're not going to step in there and say, wouldn't it be more fun if there were more steps in this process? And to go and change it for everyone. But there are a lot of negative aspects to this. It means that people don't, like, the hard mode experiment basically is the idea is if this was
básicamente
significantly more
es,
punitive,
si ellos
to the
cambiarían
point of
algo de eso
insanity,
ahorita, hay mucha
to the
gente que se
point where you're barely
molestaría.
seeing rares, and when you do, they're probably bad, and you might one day see a good rare. The game would still be fully playable.
Y para
It would
eso
just be really
estamos sacando
challenging to
hard
make
mode.
progress
Hard
through
mode va a
it.
ser como que
And
la forma de que puedes experimentar
there
Path
will
of
be
Exile como
thousands
ellos
of
esperan que lo
incremental item upgrades
experimentes.
as you're desperately trying to get your resists in order. You're
Pero no todo el
barely
mundo
seeing
quiere
any
eso.
currency. And when you finally get some and try to roll some items or trade for things, you're valuing every single incremental upgrade because I just want one of my resists to be capped. I just need the damage to be able to get past this act boss. Maps, inconceivably difficult, and then eventually, you get your character up to a stage where you can do them, and eventually maybe the best players might be able to take down pinnacle bosses. This is a little bit of exaggeration. It's probably the case that they'll run Detonate Dead and just trivialize the game because you don't need items or whatever. But this is the direction of that experiment for the people who really want a punishing process, because that gives an outlet for, wouldn't an action RPG actually be really fascinating if acquisition of power was incredibly slow and difficult? And that means we don't need to go and start lobotomizing the main game that people clearly like. This is a game here where Path of Exile right now is played by many millions of players.
Básicamente, lo que dicen es que hard mode es la forma en la que ellos te quieren mostrar como que la verdadera experiencia de Path of Exile. Eso es lo que ellos quieren. Ellos dicen que debe ser más divertido y más interesante si es muy difícil capear las resistencias. Si es muy difícil tener ese siguiente upgrade de daño para pasar un boss de un acto y que los mapas sean básicamente imposibles de hacer. Eso para ellos sería mejor, pero no quieren lobotomizar el juego que tienen ahorita, que millones de personas están jugando. Así que tenemos mucho cuidado cuando cambiamos algo ahí. Me parece que es válido.
Okay, I have to clarify it a little bit before I say it. So basically, when PoE started, we always hear the story about how it was 3 guys in your garage and you made PoE, and it was supposed to be this game that was like a better Diablo 2, a game for you guys to play yourself. So now that you're bringing up this like new version that you clearly, I think, would prefer, I just see a lot of concern about people thinking that maybe the developers in the top aren't as passionate about current PoE if they're trying to make this other version of Path of Exile that doesn't really need to exist. So basically the TLDR question is, do you regret maybe talking about hard mode prior to its release? Because you're clearly like very passionate about it.
I don't regret it. I think it's a good thought experiment. And until now, it basically has been, right? Because progress has been slow. And I think that
¿Crees que fue una buena idea hablar de el hard mode antes de sacarlo? Porque claramente estoy muy apasionado con eso y se supone que Path of Exile fue diseñado por personas que amaban el género y que querían hacer el juego que ellos querían jugar, pero están diseñando algo que te apasiona más, que es una versión alternativa del juego. Entonces, ¿qué onda? Esa fue la pregunta, básicamente.
Relatively violently about certain things. The changes in Expedition related to balance, where we moved slightly in that direction, were met with a very strong reaction, partly because we didn't communicate well at the time, and various other
Creo que
issues.
dice, claro, o sea, nosotros sentimos que ese es algo superior, pero entendemos que hay personas que no disfrutan, que no quieren eso y disfrutan lo que tienen actualmente. Nosotros en Expedition nos movimos un poquito a la dirección de hard mode y recibimos una reacción bastante fuerte. Entonces, no es justo que yo ponga lo que a mí me parece que es mejor en el plato de todo el mundo, básicamente. Es lo que había dicho antes, pero con un poquito más de detalles, pero es básicamente lo mismo que dijo antes.
this is significantly better than me walking in one day and saying, screw all of this is my company, we're going to go and make some changes, and then ruining Path of Exile overnight for the vast majority of players, which I wouldn't do. But, that's the alternative if we have hard mode, if I really
que él
want to see
diría
it
que,
happen.
¿sabes? Si yo quisiera ver esto, simplemente, ¿sabes? Jódanse, esto es mi compañía y yo lo voy a hacer lo que yo quiera.
Personally, so it's cool to see you so absolutely open about it.
Following like no, go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I understand it signals the fact that I'm not happy with Path of Exile or something, but this isn't the case. If I wasn't happy with Path of Exile, I wouldn't be working on Path of Exile. I love the game, I love the community, and I love making changes to it. I wish I understood it better, right? Like, I can't play as much as I would like to, and that does mean that we haven't discussed boss fights here because I haven't actually, on the live realm, defeated all the pinnacle bosses on a character due to being busy with work, and so it would kind of suck to have a conversation where I'm not actually talking on the same level as you guys. But this is something where I am trying as much as possible.
¿Qué me está diciendo de que, sabes? Yo adoro el juego, estoy apasionado con el juego y me encanta hacer lo que hago. Dice, pero desgraciadamente por limitaciones de trabajo y de tiempo, yo no he podido hacer todos los jefes que ustedes han hecho. Me gustaría haberlo hecho en el reino en vivo, o sea, en el servidor actual, para poder hablar en el mismo nivel. Pero quiere dejar claro de que no hay dudas en su
That is a very good question, actually. Maybe the right answer is to have it so that when we're launching leagues, we don't necessarily launch a new hard mode one alongside every single league launch. We've had to think about this, though, and Path of Exile is most fun around league launches. And I think what would happen here is that league launches are a way of onboarding players back again, because at some point you get dislocated from the game, you get knocked off because you're playing something else. And so there's a 3-monthly cadence of getting back on. And I think what will happen is that standard hard mode will start to actually have a lot more meaning. Because standard hard mode is basically, it starts fresh because there's nothing in it, due to the fact that nothing's migrated. And that's basically where people will still be pushing to get their character to defeat a pinnacle boss or whatever. Sure, they'll miss out on whatever the current league mechanic is, but realistically, that's just going to kill them. And so I think that a 3-month cadence of hard mode releases alongside the main game, combined with there being a standard that's actually meaningful, could be interesting. Now, of course, this depends on how much attention GGG puts on it, right? There's an argument for we could run a competition to get blah or whatever, but we have to be careful of the fact that that's something that a lot of players miss out on. We'd want to make sure if we were doing that we weren't doing it at the expense of events for normal players.
Está hablando acerca de que si hard mode va a tener una cadencia de 3 meses, ya que va a ser tan difícil, en 3 meses va a ser posible hacer todo. Le dice que, sabes, tal vez para eso va a tener un sentido que exista un estándar hard mode.
And root for the person who they think is going to be most likely to be lighty.
Nice. Since we've been talking about hard mode, one of the things that I had in the topic list, and briefly, so when I announced this, the main things people were like asking about UI, asking about loot, and then ultimatum pause, which we'll come around to later. So loot 2.0 was something that was
una versión difícil de Puedes Exile que están trabajando en eso y todavía no la han sacado. El plan de ellos es que sea la expansión que viene, pero no están completamente seguros que va a ser la expansión que viene.
The conversation became about hard mode, and I feel like a lot of players do kind of worry that meaningful loot improvements seems to be going into hard mode, not necessarily into the core game. Are there plans for like meaningful loot changes between now? Because, and just to further elaborate that point, one thing that I've definitely noticed as a growing trend is when we talk about improvements to the game, people being, oh, PoE 2 when, or like hard mode when, and I just think it's a little bit worrying if it seems like, oh, this will be fixed when hard mode comes out, or this will be fixed when PoE 2 comes out.
So there's a lot of topics to discuss with the loot stuff, and they range from the concept of, I do not want to look at a ground item because there is no way that it can be better than something that I could craft or find from another source. That's a concern, right? And that's something that is broken about the game. And the second topic is, there really are a lot of items on the ground, like just drifts of white items. You filter them all away, but this has an effect on the server. It has all sorts of effects, right, for there to be items. There are people who aren't running item filters, like players who are new, who are knee-deep in items. And even with, if you're filtering away white items, there are still a lot of other items. And so there are a few axes here. Now, obviously, the reason why
hablando de que las mejoras que a veces las que están hablando son, esto se va a mejorar cuando salga PoE 2, esto se va a mejorar cuando salga hard mode.
Frugal with giving items to the player. That's cool in hard mode, obviously, but it's not a solution to the main game. Now,
y Chris está hablando acerca de que, bueno, algunas cosas se van a solucionar cuando o en hard mode o en Puedes Exile 2.
we wanted to drop significantly fewer rare items and make sure that they were
Pero la
better.
meta de eso es que también haya una solución
dropping 20 rare items, we dropped one, but it's as good as 20
en la
rare
versión
items.
normal
This
del
was a plan
juego.
we had because A, the items are better, which solves the ground item issue, and B, there's far fewer things dropping.
Y
Like
dice
at face value,
que pasó, quiero que entiendan algo, o sea, en el servidor eso causa algo, que hay un montón de ítems en el piso, aunque no los veas, aunque no los tomes, sigue haciendo algo. O sea, lo correcto para nosotros sería que haya menos ítems, pero que sean más significativos. Y esa es nuestra meta.
Reduce that, a la hard mode in the main game, but it means we should be very careful before just spamming even better rare items in the player's face. And so we've taken a step back from that approach, and we're still assessing what we're going to do here. Now, we're very pleased with the way the itemization is going for PoE2. That's great, right? That's the thing happening in the future where we are able to work on those systems with full hindsight about how things work. So that's already a better experience. And the question is, where do we go with Path of Exile 1 between now and then? And I think this comes down to league mechanics and expansion mechanics, providing interesting ways of getting items, ideally, through the ground in many cases. I don't have any specifics to talk about with unannounced content there. Like, I don't want to say, actually, 3.19 tries to solve this by doing various things, because, of course, that takes the wind out of that announcement. But it is something we care about. Like, I do see quite a big chunk of Path of Exile's itemization to be in a poor state at the moment because of this. There is a decluttering project that we're doing, which ideally is something
Dice que él entiende que gran problema de la itemización de Path of Exile está en mal estado debido a esto, y es algo muy importante para nosotros. Pero no quiere anunciar nada.
But that was like a ninja patch that we did at one point without any documentation to try to test out decluttering, which has been effective because it has worked in the direction of decluttering without causing any particular alarm. But basically the intention there is to cull items that are very unlikely to be picked up heuristically. Like basically white items that are duplicates of, ones that you have plenty of access to. Some of those are culled at the point they hit the ground, which helps reduce the amount of server load and various other things.
Entonces, y se sabe, eso es algo importante que queremos solucionar, básicamente.
People did talk about it afterwards, because you said no one noticed this. Everyone said, yes. I noticed.
Everyone noticed.
Okay. I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
I'm glad everyone
Good job, guys.
Yeah, I managed to miss that conversation. Yeah. But I don't have a good answer to you in terms of the fact, like, here is the exact step we're doing to make ground items good. It's a difficult topic because itemization is like the most important thing for Path of Exile, so we want to do it correctly, and we can do it correctly.
Es un tema complicado porque la itemización es lo más importante de Path of Exile y queremos hacerlo correctamente, o sea, porque hacerlo mal es la muerte del juego, básicamente.
And in the core game, we're attacking the clutter thing. But I don't expect that we're going to do the plan of taking 20 items and condensing them to one in terms of expected value. There are numerous problems with that we've identified since
Dice
then.
que no vamos a hacer la solución de agarrar 20 ítems y convertirlos en uno solo en cuanto a valor esperado, porque hay muy numerosos problemas respecto a eso. Me gustaría escuchar técnicamente cuáles son los problemas, pero no creo que nos vayan a decir. Por curiosidad, no porque dude de lo que está diciendo, por curiosidad nada más.
I thought the recent influence with the Eldritch was great for that because it was a way that a lot of players could meaningfully improve with the items in the mid-game. And while I didn't enjoy Harvest and I felt like it was very item crafty, a lot of people got that enjoyment of being able to like upgrade their items bit by bit. It just seems a bit weird to be like worrying about items getting too many good items when I don't think people are in a scenario where like every map they drops is dropping like a 6 tier 1 white sword. I think it's more so a case of if you're, in 1 in 5 maps you're running, you're getting like meaningful like 3 or 4 tier 2, tier 3 mods. I think Heist was really great for that when you were doing the grand heists and you saw those rares. Like I would often look at those and be like, oh, they're interesting, but it was very rare to ever actually equip those. And just having more access to decent mid-tier items. Because there's a lot of things in Path of Exile, we're even seeing it with Sentinel League, where you take these two amazing items and smush them together. It feels like we've got loads of endgame systems for the super top-end crafters, but it feels like there's a lot of players in the middle who feel like they're not being catered to in that sense. So I think for those guys, that's where the loot is most disappointing.
Uno de los problemas del loot es para la gente que está en el medio, porque hay gente que está obviamente abajo, no quiere tocar nada de eso, toda esa currency es dinero, no es para craftear. La gente que está arriba tiene un montón de cosas que hacer, pero la gente que está en el medio es como que necesita cosas que le incentiven a usarlas. Y estoy más o menos de acuerdo.
because of the fact we spam items at people, they see a lot of items and quickly get to the point where they're wearing 7 and 8s or whatever. There's improvements that can be made, but it's not, it's still a pretty good item for their character. Their armor pieces have multiple resists and other relevant mods they want and good life rolls. Because of the fact that the competition for items here is happening around the flat part of the normal distribution, it's very rare that you will see upgrades at that point. And so one of the reasons why we're talking about making items worse rather than better philosophically is because that means more of the contention is occurring around the fat part of the normal distribution in the middle, so you get the ability to walk down the side of it in a more meaningful way, and there isn't this thing where just your progression stops. So that's kind of what we're trying to get at, where philosophically, if we were to make adjustments to the item system, you would probably have a smoother ride here in this like mid-game gearing that you're talking about. Like, we see this as a symptom of the larger problem. But I don't have a solution for that at the moment, because I think that some of the changes that I would like to make to solve the issue would be catastrophically received. And that's why demonstrating it as something like hard mode is saying, what do you think about this, in a place where we can try and experiment, is significantly safer. But yeah, I hear you, and we can address what you're talking about through things like the heist item stuff and other things in League mechanics, where we do potentially curate the items people are getting to try to make the experience more smooth for them. It's not my preferred solution, but...
One last thing, and then I'll let Octavian go. And also, because I know that when I talked about it, I kind of knew that there would be people saying, but just use essences. It kind of feels like there's a bit of a hole currently where... yes, I think the system's a lot better in Atlas last week. Yeah, I was adding like 10 essences every single map I run, but it feels like a weird thing where it's like, if the base itemization is so holy that the solution is to just like hoard thousands of essences to then throw an item, it seems like somewhere something has gone wrong, and there's just like, this is just the band-aid that we're sticking over it.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just going to agree. Yeah, something certainly isn't in a good place with the item system there, and thankfully there are solutions.
Tarki dice que algo claramente está mal en el sistema de crafteo, porque dicen como que, no, solamente tus esencias salen un montón, claro. Pero, o sea, la solución es simplemente ten miles de esencias, farmea miles de esencias y tíralas hasta que salga lo que tú quieres. Eso parece como que es una curita que están poniendo encima del problema y no está solucionando el problema. Porque si el sistema de optimización es tan bueno y es tan sagrado, pues tenemos que usar esta cosa que vino después de eso para solucionarlo.
Until I've gotten a base and I can just make a really good item for that slot instead, is the friction of having to get a 6-link or having to get the right colors or having to solve reanointing an amulet or things that have to do with like the
se supone que hay cosas que han cambiado de Paradox Excel con el tiempo, pero no sé qué tanto, o sea, la realidad es que nadie lo sabe, nada más la gente que trabaja aquí.
Things like harvest res swaps, I think, were an excellent tool for that, because now you just need like a elemental res on your gear, and it can be lightning or fire, and so you can swap it around and have a lot more flexibility there. So it's as much about, because like you can't really compare two pieces of gear completely directly if there's other sunk cost in a piece of gear you're already wearing.
To piggyback off that,
I understand.
Sorry, I think it's the fact that, for me anyway, I don't know if other people feel the same, I feel like often there's no point trying to craft until I have the eye level 86. That might be a self-imposed thing, but it's like there's this weird thing where if you get stuck in like, I don't know, tier 14s or tier 15s, whatever is your build, and you have all these tools available, you're like, well, I don't want to use these until I have the eye level 86 to start, because it's just a waste. And I think when you then have players who feel like they have to trade to get that first
en algunos casos es cierto, estoy diciendo como que, bueno, otro problema que tienes como que cuando tengas todas las
modifiers anyway, you probably settle on something below that anyway, so it's like
cuando quieres craftear, tienes como que empezar con tener una base y tener 86 en la mayoría de los casos. Entonces, si tú estás atascado en una pasta tier 14, es como que tengo todas estas herramientas pero no las puedo usar. Y en la mayoría de los casos es cierto.
I mean, I guess you can if they're worthless in the end, but the advice to players is save your currency for maps. And in this case, it's save your extreme super endgame crafting stuff for perfect base types, because it would be a waste to use them early. Conceptually, this has prompted many discussions internally, like having tiered currency items, where you have the ability to have certain currency items that are far more appropriate for early / like non-perfect items, because
una cosa que ha surgido la discusión dentro de la compañía es que tal si tenemos tiers de currency, tiers de currency, lo que dije. Eso ayudaría a que tengas un montón para esta cosa que es más de menor bajo nivel, así puedes incentivarte a craftear y a tener lo que necesitas en el momento y guardas lo caro para más adelante. Pero
And I
eso
understand
significa,
it's not
¿saben qué?
particularly
Más
useful for me to
clutter,
bring it up
más
as a
bullshit.
discussion point here, but we do
Y
spend a lot of time
no
looking
creo que sea
theoretically
la
at
solución
different ways
correcta.
of trying to approach this, and we reject most of them. They do rock the boat pretty heavily.
I think following this, I actually think this is probably something a lot of the chat will enjoy, which is I think Sentinel might actually solve a lot of this, like with the combining. So, because I think that's really interesting as a concept for like hitting those mid-tier items.
¿Alguien cree que lo de
struck me
Sentinel que
is,
suma uno más otro va a solucionar
well,
bastante?
With Taki saying, "Oh, I'm waiting for the 86," but so when we combine things, if I understand correctly, it'll like assume some of the mods from like each items. You could maybe like essence both and get lucky. Some of that will combine, and then a third mod could appear. And say that third mod maybe, if as long as you don't tie that at 86, I think you're gonna see a lot more people like experimenting with items that are like maybe more of a mid range to like hit that jackpot on the Sentinel.
Yep. The intention is that it pulls your prefixes and suffixes together and selects some selection out of that pool. So providing it's possible for that to occur on the base type, like you're not putting an influence mod that can't go on.
Creo que eso está como confirmando de que la idea sería esa, de que tú agarres
that it actually rolls one of the new ones, which are meant to be pretty swingy and interesting as well.
de que agarres, ¿sabes? Agarres estos ítems que tú más o menos te gustan, los juntes y la mayoría de las veces vas a conseguir algo mejor.
You put two good items in. Like you look at the Punnett square here from biology, right?
Ya que le copian a la CIPA.
You put two items in that have good mods. You're going to get 25% of
la
the
CIPA
time
no está mal, pero no me gusta. A mí particularmente, y saben que yo adoro la CIPA. Y me gusta lo que están haciendo cada tanto tiempo lo chequeo, pero no me gusta el sistema de crafteo. O sea, a mí me parece que el de Puedes Exile, Dios me perdone, es superior. No es el adecuado, pero es superior.
Now, for your endgame item crafting here, you've just kind of trashed two items and got something out that's kind of a hodgepodge of those two. Maybe it is better. There's a lot more of a gray area of things that are marginally better, and it could feel like an upgrade. But when you throw in the random mutations that occur in terms of extra mods and, like, you know, there's things that modify the tiers of mods and so on, you might get something out that certainly was not possible with any other crafting system, and that will feel good.
To follow up on this, so we had Scourge, which tried some of the similar steps with like you throw something in and hope for something better. And even with like hundreds of iterations of trying this, we ended up very often with things that just didn't work. Have you like thought about making sure that doesn't happen in Sentinel?
Oh,
we aren't intentionally trying to select the mods that you get to make sure that it meets a certain degree of goodness. We are biasing in favor of a better outcome because of the fact we try to be generous with the combination process, but it's still completely up to randomness.
Okay, Chris dice que le preguntaron, en Scourge teníamos la forma de corromper ítems y tal, y la mayoría de las veces no es porque bien lo conseguimos. Así que ellos dicen como que estamos usando como cierta cosa a favor de que sea algo bueno, pero sigue siendo al azar. So, la respuesta es cualquier cosa, ¿no? Pero eso lo que quiere decir es como que, mira, si 1000 personas lo hacen, el 51% va a estar feliz. Y el 49% puede que no. Eso es lo que trata de decir, básicamente.
People onto that. So even if, for example, Sentinel actually does provide all the tools for these players who do like they do get stuck in whites or yellows or whatever, but it's through meaningfully engaging with the league mechanic. I think that's to me where I worry about the fact that the base items that drop are bad, because there are solutions, but it's not from what they pick up, it's from accessing all these different league mechanics, jumbling all this stuff together. I think the base experience which needs to improve. That was one thing I always thought was very good about early Path of Exile. You could be the worst player in the world in like beta PoE and theoretically drop the best Corsair sword in the game. Whereas now that's literally impossible, the way that like slamming influences together work, or slamming items together, or slamming your sentinels together to then get the super giga sentinel to add your thing.
Yeah, you are right. Now, thankfully, you can find pretty good sentinels just naturally on the ground if you get lucky with a good rare drop, so they don't all have to come from crafting. But there are some quirky mods that do, of course, that are pretty desirable. Having said that, you're running through the sentinels, they last for 10 maps or whatever, so you are always looking for a fresh supply of good ones that you do get from the ground. Now, what's interesting here is the progression of finding sentinels is a bit slower than normal items. You do find white sentinels relatively often. They still work well, of course. And, when you find blue ones that have mods on, those mods will feel impactful.
Dice que los centinelas, en comparación,
kind of correctly paced item system thing going
En comparación
on.
a los ítems normales, es un poco más lento que los ítems. Vas a tener muchos sentinelas blancos para poder usar y funcionan tal cual. Y pocas veces vas a tener azules, y menos aún vas a tener raros. Y eso significa que vas a sentir más o menos como una progresión de niveles en cuanto a los sentinelas.
So it will be interesting to see how that goes.
Así que va a ser interesante para ellos ver cómo
just
sucede
for
esto.
clarification, the baseline effect of, I mean, there's the 3 different types of sentinels, and there's the one of the varieties of sentinels will simply affect like the normal monsters, so it's not the one that adds various reward types to rares or uniques or whatever. The baseline effect of that sentinel is something like a multiplicative quantity or rarity effect. Like that's what it means when it says it
increases. Yeah, so the empowerment number increases damage and damage reduction. Then it increases quantity and rarity and has a chance to give reward icons on monsters. So a baseline white sentinel will cause
el
you to get
empowerment
icons on monsters.
aumenta
However,
la reducción de daño que tienen los enemigos, el daño que hacen los enemigos, la quantity y la rarity de los enemigos, y tiene un chance de agregarte un icono adicional para que dropeen más recompensas.
You can choose to play with that sentinel because you're more likely to get the type of reward. And if you're a relatively new player who doesn't want to understand advanced concepts, and you say, I want a better weapon, then using the Sentinel that gives more weapon rewards is probably a naive way that you can go in the direction of finding a rare weapon periodically. Now, if it's 4% of enemies and they empower a few dozen enemies, and they can be used, in 10 maps, for example, that's hundreds of enemies. Empowered a 4% chance means you will be finding a whole bunch of rare weapons as a result of fully consuming that Sentinel. So there is a bit of direction that naive players can go in. Of course, anyone watching this is probably doing some significantly more advanced strategy there.
This is just a hypothetical. Doesn't that in a way add to just more item bloat and loot on the floor? Would there ever be a way that you could have a league mechanic where instead of it being like more weapons, it's luckily rolled weapons? So that way you're not just adding to like 100 more items on the floor. Like if MP gets a 5-man group and like their game is crashing, so much stuff is dropping, it's the same amount of stuff dropping, but it's just dropping with like luckier rolls to it.
In this case here, because it's putting a specific reward icon on a monster, there's a degree of satisfaction that you get from planning, I want these reward icons, seeing them pop up in combat as a result
Está hablando de cómo interactuar el empoderamiento de los mobs, de los sentinel a los mobs.
Now, of course, you're right, it does mean more items on the ground, but it's
y dice que en teoría significa sí, más ítems en el juego, en el piso, pero potencialmente no va a ser más que otra liga.
But that's more subtle. That's the case where I do all the stuff to feel like better rewards, and then I still get trash because I was unlucky, and then I hate the game.
Y Chris dice, ¿sabes? Eso es un poquito más sutil de que sean lucky, que caigan lucky. Porque, o sea, pueden caer y tú dices, bueno, tengo esto que es lucky, pero me sigue cayendo basura. Entonces, puede ser que lo esté haciendo, pero...
But could we have a clarification on how many sentinels do we actually drop in a map if we were just like Alcan going? Because you said a couple, but...
¿Cuántos sentinelas vamos a dropear en un mapa si ya estamos haciendo Alcan
You're
Go?
not meant to run out of sentinels, right? You will always have options available. It's rare for good players to have to fall down to using white sentinels because they've run out of their higher ones. But I'm expecting, and this depends a little bit on our fine tuning this week. Like we're currently changing this every day based on alpha feedback in our simulations. But advanced players will be able to use rare sentinels quite a lot of the time, or maybe they'll choose to use a magic one that's got some god mods on it that they really want. And a lot of the time, rare sentinels are being made through the process of combining 2 magics, because the way it works is if the number of mods is 3 or higher, it becomes rare. So if you put 2 magic sentinels in with 2 mods each, there's a pretty good chance you will be able to merge them together to get something with more than 2 mods. And so you get the ability to kind of spread out into using rares. You still find them, of course, as you're playing, but it's not the case that you're sitting there desperate for sentinels. Then, of course, as soon as you throw trade into this for players who want to, you kind of have an unlimited supply of whatever sentinels are in the economy that you want to trade for. Though personally, in my gameplay at least, haven't found it particularly necessary to waste time trading for them. I'd rather just keep playing and get more items as a result of playing.
I think.
Can you combine 2 of the white ones and have them combine up into magic? Is that like the idea here? Is that we can like combine from normal sentinels into magic into rare, or is that only with like
in order for currency? Yeah, you can definitely combine from normal into magic if you get a mod roll on it, and it can be an impactful mod, of course. What I'm mostly worried about is our QA team keep coming up with
no dijo exactamente cuántos te van a caer, pero dijo que la idea
stuff. Like if I take this thing and combine it with white, then such and such happens that I won't describe on the podcast because it's abusive. And we keep having to like work out, well, we don't want to stop that behavior, but it does sound awfully easy here, you know? And so we're certainly worried about interesting side effects that can happen as a result of this.
I see. Yeah.
Okay.
So like splitting off really good mods or something. Yeah.
There's some interesting stuff that's possible here, yeah.
Oh my god.
Like, what if I got my Sentinel that was blue that just had the one mod that I want? Or if it wasn't a Sentinel, maybe it's a regular game item. Like,
wait.
You know the silly stuff people do with crafting normal items in Path of Exile, the complicated chains of everything involving meta mods? It's making our life a living hell with regard to this recombination stuff, because there are all these things that involve really simple blue items with a single mod that you want and complicated recombination stuff. And so you'll have the math where someone is like, okay, so in standard, there's an X% chance you're going to make this item. And I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And right, you had to destroy 2 mirror-worthy items to make that, though. You know, so there's going to be some high-stakes gambling with this stuff.
So, with that in mind,
básicamente está diciendo como que, mira, no quiere explicar cómo funciona exactamente, pero que ellos tienen como que un infierno absoluto tratando de balancear esto y no quieren decir nada en este podcast porque hay cosas interesantes que pueden pasar si tú combinas que sí, un mágico en particular con uno blanco. Puedes como que básicamente splitear una base o some shit like that, ¿sabes? Entonces...
I think this is people overthinking it. The league was designed to be one of the most straightforward play and kill monsters leagues. Like it's, so I'm going to try to sell it to you as a simple thing, right? So playing the league, and when you want your breach style encounter to occur, when you want combat to be juiced up, you know, you feel that you can handle it, you press the key to make that sentinel come out. And there are 3 sentinels, so you could do this 3 times per area. So you choose at whatever place is convenient to you, either never or somewhere, 3 times to have the sentinels occur. They instantly occur, they follow you around, tag the monsters, and if you spec correctly, it's faster than you can kill the monsters, and if you haven't spec correctly, you're still probably getting full value from the sentinel, you just won't be getting every single monster tagged, and life is good. Then there's the controller, right? So that's the passive tree thing. You can place the filaments
que Gus está tratando de vendernos la liga, puede ser que debería ser algo muy sencillo. Como por ejemplo, dice, sabes, tú estás mapeando, estás haciendo tus cosas y tienes 3 botones. Tú presionas los botones cuando sientes que quieras empoderar a los monstruos. Lo haces más difíciles, pero te van a dar mejores recompensas.
Then there's the question of actually swapping your sentinels in and out, because they do have charge. You are right that if I put some sentinels in, then 10 maps later, I will have to put different sentinels in. And at some point, I will have to pick sentinels up. And hopefully, picking items up is not a problem. But yes, there will be some degree of assessing these and deciding which ones are important for you. Now, we have very clear UI signaling as to when sentinels are getting depleted. You don't get a situation where you go into a map and go to trigger your sentinel and think, oh, crap, it ran out last map and I wasn't aware of that. Like, we have a lot of stuff in place so you can see. And it will mean that occasionally,
dice que obviamente los sentinelas se van a agotar, eso a veces va a ser un pequeño, ¿sabes? Molestia tener que cambiarlos y tal, pero tenemos UI muy claro que te va a decir cuándo se está agotando y cuándo se agotó, para que no te pase que tú entras al mapa, presionas la tecla y se me agotó mi sentinela y no me he dado cuenta.
That's somewhat endgame focused, right? Like it's not something you're having to worry about during the
campaign. Puedes combinar sentinelas si quieres, pero es algo que puedes hacer, no es algo que tienes que hacer.
You know, you're not having to build a complicated temple. You're not having to try to track down individual Pokemon that you haven't captured yet. It's pretty much a matter of, I look in my Sentinel locker and I've got my depleted Sentinels ready for when I find a combining power core. And I've got my Sentinels that have good mods on them where I slap one of those in and keep playing.
And then the final 2 concerns, because I think you've done a pretty good job reassuring there, is why are they 2x2? Because obviously if you're picking up even just 3 in a map, that's like half your inventory gone.
We already have that bingo slot crossed off. They're 2x2 because it's important with item weight for a foreboding ancient machine that you're carrying around to not be the size of a ring, pretty much.
Right.
Yes, you're right. You're right. This does mean that if you're picking up tons of them in a map, then you have your inventory full. But you're not picking up tons of them in the map. You're picking up a small number. It hasn't been a problem so far in our testing. There's a locker for these. You might not. If you've already got enough from the stash, there's no real need to pick up extra ones.
Could we not then go for 8x8? Just to really sell the identity of this ancient giant technology.
Maybe some of the unique ones
I was playing... There was a quest in Hellgate London where you have to repair a train, and you have to pick up train parts, and they were big. I had a train across my inventory. It was amazing. I wrote down train parts in my ideas document after that. You know, like
I'm going to let Octavian
items
go.
that are too big are called train parts.
I'm going to let Octavian go, but quickly, have you heard of Backpack Hero? I think
it's
you would
excellent.
genuinely really enjoy the game. It's free on itch.io. It's like a dungeon crawler, but the whole idea is you start off with a very small inventory, and as you level up, you get to expand your inventory in different directions, and then all your skills come from the items in your inventory, and you gotta like juggle like, oh, if I want a sword, but it's 5x5 in that direction, do I need to expand my inventory up? And it'll be stuff like items to the left gain bonuses, or items to the right. It's completely free. This isn't an ad or anything. I think you genuinely really enjoy that and get a lot of like interesting design.
Está hablando de que el protagonista porque tiene que ser 2x2 porque
for reference,
agarras un
later
par.
when a system comes up that is in some way maybe similar to part of that, I'm saying at the point you mentioned this, that I already had that idea.
This was in the 2007 document.
Que era que 2x2 dice que, bueno, básicamente por el peso y tal y esto. Y le dice que, bueno, ¿por qué no los hacemos 8x8? Y le dice, sabes, yo tengo una idea de una liga en la que tienes que arreglar trenes, y los trenes las partes del tren son gigantes, te ocupan la mitad del inventario, y creo que es una liga muy cool. Y entonces Tarky le dice que hay un juego que se llama Backpack Hero, en la que todo tu personaje está en el backpack, en la mochila, y depende, y tú tienes que expandir la mochila en ciertas partes, como que si quieres una espada, la espada de 5x5, bueno, la mochila tiene que ir para arriba para que quepa toda la espada y así. Oye, ese juego suena cool, dice que es gratis también. Backpack Hero, anótenlo ahí, lo chequemos ahora.
Your collection of where you're going with the recipe tree. Your only progression, in fact, was how far through the recipes you are. When you've completed all your arch nemesis mods, you've got nothing in terms of league progression apart from your rewards that you've received so far, like the 120 uniques or whatever you got to spawn. So because of this, they were untradeable. Because they were untradeable, they automatically went into there and couldn't be put in your main inventory, and so on and so on. In Sentinel, your progression is not what Sentinels you have, because we have some kind of YOLO crazy lottery slot machine mechanic for these guys. And so your progression is the Sentinel controller, and overall just how far through the league you've progressed.
Okay.
As you kill empowered enemies,
dice que la progresión de los Sentinels no es cuáles tienes, porque tenemos la máquina de lotería esta que te puede crear el mejor Sentinela casi que al primer nivel, ¿no? Pero dice que toda la progresión está en el control de los Sentinelas, en el UI este que va creciendo y tal y eso.
There's all these reasons why constraints are good in games in terms of adding challenge, but I will still make sure that everything is as tradable as it can be, despite the fact that, you know, if they weren't tradable, it's much easier to curate the experience here.
So, go on, Nicky.
I just had some questions about it's more like the Sentinels and how we store them. Do we have enough space
in the locker?
Yes.
No, sí son tradeables.
It's pretty big, and you can put them in regular tabs. The purpose of the locker isn't to hold all your Sentinels, though honestly it's plenty because you're not keeping that many. But the purpose of it is so that the free player who hasn't bought any stash tabs isn't completely shafted by the fact that you have to carry all these machines around. You have a place to put them. And you get basically 3 almost full-size tabs. Like, imagine a window with a full-size stash tab, and then we chop the top off to store the currency items. And so it's missing a few rows up there, and you've got 3 of those, 1 for each flavor of Sentinel. Now, what you're keeping is the Sentinels you plan to use, which isn't that many, and the Sentinels you want to combine, which again isn't that many because you're constrained by the amount of power cores you're picking up. If you're some crazy player who wants to trade a lot and you have a library of 1,000 Sentinels that you want to try to combine and you're doing crazy stuff, then yeah, you'll probably need to use a bunch of stash tabs to store it. But that's just like if you're trying to like complete tons of chaos recipes at the same time or something else that's very stash expensive. But I would expect the regular player to find that the 3 almost full tabs is plenty of storage here.
Okay.
Follow up to that.
Dice que las tabs que te van a dar gratis para los sentinelas de la liga como tal, esto es suficiente para cualquier persona. Excepto la gente que quiera tradear miles de sentinelas o hacerlos todas a la vez, que sería el equivalente como que alguien que quiera hacer 100 caos recipes, pero todos a la vez, en lugar de hacerlos apenas los consigue.
It's very likely it's done by default these days, but we may just be patching it in 2 days in if we've forgotten about it.
Go on, Rose.
If I could move for a second away from Sentinels before we come back to it, you kind of really had me sold on that power grid system.
No se he preguntado cosas.
Filaments, I think they're called.
Pero es normal, o sea, Octavian y Siggy preguntan menos o hacen menos cosas. Igual es significativo cuando preguntan. A veces pasa también en mis podcasts. Es normal.
Like the Atlas or the skill tree.
So there is a conceptually subtle difference between these. And yeah, look, this is a good experiment in that direction, right? You know, we can't be accused of not trying stuff. The key thing is here, you are not allocating nodes. You don't click on a node to get it. What you're doing is you're allocating edges that connect the nodes. So in graph theory, it's a little different. And so it's not exactly the same system. But the key thing here is power flows currently in what's called a breadth-first search. So it's powering things that are closest filament-wise to the starting location. So what that means is if you were to put a ton of filaments down, it will flow out to the things that are nearby, kind of going out like this as opposed to going deep down some direction.
Right.
And so the reason why is because that way there's some degree of understanding of which nodes are going to be powered first, which is the closest ones. If you don't want things to be powered, don't put filaments to them. You're basically choosing to control the power flow. The key thing about planning with the passive tree and the atlas tree is you want to control the ordering. Like I feel that a planning tool, you're probably going to want to specify this is the order the passives need to be allocated in, which is no problem. We could add this tool in the future. It's just a bit more complicated. This is actually this power flow thing. We're trying to get right to the point where, like our internal version we have at the moment has an interesting case where your sentinel slots require 3 pieces of power, so they're quite power hungry things, and they're also quite far away from the start, some of them. And so you have a situation where we have like a place where you can kind of lock yourself out right now, where you've tried to power a sentinel slot, but it's powering the things closest to it first, and so no sentinel slot is allocated, and it doesn't let you save the configuration. And so our solution to that is making it prioritize power to sentinel slots and then do a breadth first search out for the rest of the nodes. And we're trying very hard to make sure we've taken all these things into account so that it feels very natural to the player, because they obviously intend to power their sentinel slots with priority, and then they intend to power stuff that's closest to the stuff they've powered. Long story short, though, is this highlighted the fact that if we're doing planning tools, we have to make sure that we understand the intent of what order the player wants the plan to occur in. Because if you spec out your passive tree and we pick some random passives
siento que esto que está explicando es interesante, pero
you'll probably say, I want my life points
es como
first,
que medio obvio. No sé ni por qué me preguntaron.
Right. I mean, the Chinese version does have a planner on it where you can set it out.
It doesn't allocate
3.0 beta.
It doesn't allocate, yeah.
Yeah, it basically is a thing which will put ghost passives where you can specify what they are. So we're visualizing a build on the
Están hablando de si puedes planear cosas
en el
árbol de pasivas, así como se hace en el de Sentinela. Y le dijeron, sabes, en la versión china está esto y tal. Y le dice, sí, pero no te aloca cosas automáticamente.
But yeah, I'm not opposed to there being better planning tools for the trees. It's just quite a large undertaking to get it where we want it to be.
Coming back to Sentinel, so my biggest concern with it, you've done a decent job, especially the other thing, is managing the 3 extra keybinds. Obviously, some players, they don't care about it. The Warcry God gamers, they're like 8 extra keybinds, let's go. But yeah, it seems like quite a big jump. And also, especially since there are a lot of times in current Path of Exile, like if I'm doing an expedition next to like an Alva or like a Betrayal or something, where I'm trying to do one league mechanic, but the buttons are sharing. Is there not some concern with like keybinds overflowing on each other in certain cases?
No vería, pues son distintos.
So we made sure there are 3 keybinds here because all of the approaches to managing 3 sentinels with fewer keybinds were just janky. And so we're using, by default, F2, F3, F4, which are not used by anything else. And you can rebind these, of course. It could be literally anything. It could be Control A or something if you want. You know, there's no problem with what the defaults are as far as we're concerned. But you only have to tag these once an area. This isn't the case of like look at
Están hablando de que si no les preocupa de que esta liga tenga 3 botones para la liga, mientras que en otras tienes uno solo, y a veces ese botón cuando estás haciendo una expedition al lado de un alba se comparten y tal, y es un problema.
You're playing, then you slap the button. But in this case, the button could be really close to your other keys if you choose to bind it. So it honestly hasn't been a big issue. In fact, internally, F2, F3, and F4 are some of our debug development tools. They cause crazy stuff to appear on the screen, and we're still playing despite that. Like when I'm testing Sentinel, I press F2 and all this green stuff appears, and I just ignore it and keep playing, and it hasn't even been a problem. So on live, where you don't get green stuff when you press the key, it's going to be even sweeter.
Well, no, maybe the green stuff is what makes it good for you. I think we need stuff to flashbang on the screen so I know I've pressed the button correctly.
I mean, if you have Alt-bound, Alt F4 is a pretty good one too.
Yeah,
you can get some nice action with that.
Yeah, no, you're right. That is a concern. But that's
Está hablando también que tú puedes cambiar los botones como tú quieras. Están por defecto un F1, F2, F3, pero bueno.
We got confirmation from Bex in the chat, in the Discord chat, that you can search in the Sentinel locker for mods that you want.
Puedes buscar mods en el locker de Sentinel.
Thank you, team members, for being proactive.
Do you guys have any more Sentinel questions? Because I was maybe going to talk about a belt that people have been asking to talk about, but I don't know if we really even need to talk about the belt if people want to talk about other things.
I'm not going to ask what the bell is, because I know everything about this game.
What's the
Bien,
bell?
3 horas ya en
Bells.
este podcast. Wow.
We don't say T's in England.
Belt. That
what
makes a lot more
This
sense.
is a glass.
That makes a lot more sense.
This is a
I'm
glass
gonna
of
wait for longer
water.
than I thought. The bell.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, Gov. What about the bell?
Yeah. This is a bell. Yeah. Don't say T's around here. Yeah.
Yeah, you just drink it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Están jodiendo
So,
acerca
yeah,
de...
what's the headhunter dealio?
no sé, ¿cómo decirlo? Manerismos
So an
de
unintended
el
consequence of
inglés
the
británico y el
Archnemesis stuff
inglés
is
norteamericano.
that you can't.
Si lo traduzco literalmente no tiene ningún chiste ni siquiera.
Headhunter will only get
Sorry.
each Archnemesis mod one time due to the fact they're designed to be interesting, impactful, exclusive things. It doesn't work to have them more than one time. The thing is, we've looked into this extensively, and it's still really powerful. Like, an Archnemesis mod is so much more powerful than the previous mod is. On average, picking up a bunch of these mods is
Está muy
way
cómodo.
better
Gracias por el tier
than
1,
picking up a
Ronaldo.
bunch of stuff
It's
before.
fun, papi. Thank you,
Previously, they
you.
were just bags of stats, and these are much better than bags of stats. And last time, Soul Eater could only stack once as well. Like, you obviously want Soul Eater and various other mods. And you're getting the same situation here. So we're trying to find contrived examples of where a Headhunter player is hurt. And yes, there may be a case where if you're able to kill monsters efficiently enough, that stacking some of the old style kind of crappy mod multiple times is better than having a bag of Headhunter mods. Headhunter Archnemesis mods, but realistically, we don't see it as a nerf there. And it is a change, and we have said no balance changes, but this is one where it kind of has to be, and we didn't want to delay the whole Archnemesis mod thing just for the sake of Headhunter, but players are not done badly here. And the other thing is, all the pseudo Headhunter style mods, you know, the ones that you get elsewhere, all are a lot stronger now because they gave you far fewer mods. Like, there was this ability to get them fast, and now the mods are more powerful. And we added Headhunter Sentinels, and they're awesome.
Ok. Estaba diciendo
Have you
básicamente
got
que
a
el Hunter no está nerfeado realmente.
just
Dice
a
que
number on like how many Archnemesis mods are there actually?
agarras muchos más mods que
I
antes.
don't know. I think they added some more that weren't in the base. Yeah, they did a bunch of stuff.
Yep, there is a number.
But I trust them implicitly. When I said, "How did that go?" and they go, "Good," and I'm like, "Done." I have a message from him. 80-ish.
Oh wow, okay.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
We definitely need that glossary.
What?
This was
30.
80 y tantos mods
This
de
was a bunch of
Archnemesis.
work.
So many.
You guys kind of undersold it a little bit.
A lot, kind of. A lot.
So, a caveat here is that some of these are exclusive to be only on Magics or Rares. Like, for example, there were some that would be so oppressive on Magics that we don't put them on Magics because otherwise you're encountering like 6 copies or 10 copies of it at the same time. But yeah, there's a lot of these, and there was a bunch of work there. But that's the thing about exploration, right? Like, it sucks to know it all in advance.
So
Are
you can
there
only
like
get 80 Headhunter buffs. Sorry, guys.
right? Yeah. Are there any cool Archnemesis mods that are strictly beneficial, or is it only like things that will kill you, like the inner treasure in the past with Nemesis?
Honestly, have not seen this list. Like, at no point have I looked at it. I had no idea it was 80. I'm surprised and happy as well. But this is because I trust that developer completely to the point where he just did it, and that's amazing.
Te preguntaba que si había
So-
algún mod que sea beneficioso
Is that
como
like,
Inner Treasure, que te daba un
Is there, like, a
único seguro en
progression
Nemesis.
of where they can spawn? Because I remember
Chris dice,
watching like
ni siquiera he visto la lista, yo
clip
confío por
of
completo en
someone
este
encountering
desarrollador, así que si me dijo que estaba bien,
crazy
probablemente esté bien.
in mudflats on some raw. I forget her name. I'm sorry, but yeah, there was like an Arx Nemesis crazy raw that just kind of murdered people. So I'm like, will there be things that are like available early and maybe like very late in terms of like mod pools?
My impression is that is the case, but I'm just getting confirmation at the moment.
Está
I think
preguntando.
that some of the more crazy ones definitely aren't spawning early, but we'll know in a few seconds. Yeah, okay. So they all have starting levels that are based on their complexity. So yes, they do kick in at various points.
Perfecto. O sea,
Cool.
que la dificultad del
And
mod de
then when
Archnemesis
it comes to, we can
no están
sometimes
todos
get
al principio,
4 at
básicamente. O sea,
once.
algunos aparecen más adelante.
Is there anything preventing,
Es como, por ejemplo, ¿se acuerdan de Reflect? Reflect es imposible que salga durante los actos. Sale más adelante.
No, we've done it the other way. They purposely go for the worst combos.
Yeah, let's be real. We can all answer that question.
Smile.
But the wonderful thing about being a streamer is everyone can enjoy that experience with you.
Yeah. Enjoy. That's a good word.
Very good. There's a very common question chat was asking a lot that I'll ask for them. Could you ask for the confirmation if the 2% chance for extra content on all the blocking keystones, so the turn off certain league mechanic, you get 2% for the others, is that per like content type, so 2% added, so like going from 8% base to 10% base, or is that like split across the board?
I believe so.
How's that done?
My understanding is that there is a sweet spot there where it's quite an impactful bonus. So I think it's 8 goes to 10 goes to 12. But yeah, please message me someone if this is wrong.
Sick.
It's not the case that it goes from 8 to like 8.16% because that's 2% of 8. Have fun. That's not the case.
Nice.
Oh, but it's also, is it applying to the leftover mechanic or to all of the mechanics that can possibly happen?
Pretty sure to all.
Yes.
The non-existing ones already as well? Well, that would be a bad thing.
What do you mean by non-existing? Let's clarify.
Okay, so
Yeah, we're getting
I have a lighty specific question. So, can you ask Mr. Wilson to clarify how the new Atlas keystones that block league mechanics work? Specifically, if I click 9 out of 10 of them, will I get plus 18 chance for harvest? That's the one remaining, or plus 18 chance for extra content, which then has like 1 out of 7 chance to be harvest?
Esa es buena. Lighty
It
hizo una
adds to all the
pregunta.
other mechanics. So when I turn off, let's say they all start with 8%. It's not 8%, but it varies. But let's say they're all 8%. So I turn
Déjame
the first one
escuchar
off.
para
So all of
decirles.
them go from 8% to 10%.
Porque es importante.
Right?
Es
I'm saying
técnica la
right to my
pregunta.
team. There's a bit of stream delay, so, we'll find out soon. I purposefully didn't put developers in the room with me for this because I don't really... Yeah, so it was a yes on that. I don't really like the thing where I'm just a conduit to the dev check emote repeatedly, So I've got them there as an emergency.
Classic, though.
But yes, basically it does. If they're all 8%, I turn one off. Now there's a 0 and a bunch of 10s. Then I turn another off. Now there's 2 zeros and a bunch of 12s, and so on and so on.
Okay.
Since we talked about the whole league,
básicamente la pregunta era esta. Si yo toco los nodos estos que me elimina la posibilidad de que salgan brechas, por ejemplo, cuando vayan a rolear el contenido adicional que te da eso, que esa keystone te va a decir, ahora tienes 18% de chance adicional de que salga Harvest, y Harvest no bloquee. Quiere decir que tienes 18% de chance de que salga, o tienes 18% de chance de Harvest y 0% de Bridge, 0% de este, 0% de este, 0% de este, 0% de este. Eso, a nivel estadístico hay una diferencia. Obviamente es peor. Y es de la forma peor, creo.
With Ultimatum, because
Si es que entendí bien.
it affects everyone in the instance, a pause is appropriate, everyone gets paused. Whereas if you're looking at a thing and someone else is elsewhere in the instance in regular mapping, it sucks for them if there's a pause, in multiplayer situations. But yeah, look, I don't think that stops us potentially doing this. It's just a matter of us finding a nice, clean way of doing it.
Or even if, there might be some weird, abuse case, but maybe having it just there's a safe zone around characters, you can't deal damage, it puts you in the grace state of you can't deal damage or whatever. If you move, it breaks it or something.
Yeah, very likely abuse cases, but we'll discuss it. It's the kind of thing which I suspect we won't have anyone philosophically opposed to.
You had a change with the instance holder and all that with who can take the portal. You could do that for whether or not the map will be pausable by the owner or not through mechanics, if that was a thing.
Yep, that's true.
Yep.
I'm not going to argue with it.
Any concerns about the reward structure of Sentinel? That's always a big problem, I feel, for a lot of people. Initially the league isn't necessarily rewarding enough, and it's a lot more buttons, and many people don't like buttons. Personally, I like buttons a lot. The direction of the game where you've got more vol skills and more utility skills is super cool for me, but pressing more buttons and then not necessarily getting a big enough reward for that.
So there's two types of leagues in terms of rewards, right? One of them gives you rewards as you do the league, and then there's no kind of long-term super reward you're working towards. And then there are leagues like Arch Nemesis where you get some reward, but realistically you're trying to save up for some crazy pile of 100 uniques that you get through some combination of things. So when you play Arch Nemesis, you might think, man, this is a bit less rewarding than usual. But when you play Breach, short of the fact that there are splinters, I guess, or something as your final thing you're working towards, most of the time you're getting your rewards straight away. And Sentinel is very much the straight away type, because every monster that is empowered is dropping significantly better than a regular monster. It's like fighting a Scourge monster. or a delirium monster. And in addition, there are reward icons popping up all over the place. And if you get a sentinel, which is going to give you a 2% chance of uniques, and then you tag 200 monsters over the next few areas, you're going to get 4 uniques from that, and they're happening soon. It's not an investment for very far in the future. It's an investment for the next quarter of an hour. And so your rewards are given to you pretty fast. Now, there is long-term progression, of course, working towards better sentinel loadouts and ideally getting these cool endgame ones, and there's stuff to look forward to, but it's far more front-loaded in terms of actually getting rewards now.
Está hablando de que hay algunas ligas en las que tú tomas cosas y estás aguantando o estás como que progresando acerca de algo grande. Por ejemplo, Bridge, todos los fragmentos hasta de hacer a Bridgestone. En este caso, la mayor cantidad de las recompensas las tienes adelante. Se pone el sentinela, lo usas, ahí tienes tus recompensas. Obviamente cosas hay que trabajar, o sea, vas a conseguir unos cuantos sentinelas que son buenas y los vas a guardar y vas a trabajar para conseguir los mejores sentinelas, vas a mejorar los puntos de pasivos de tus sentinelas y tal y todo eso, pero no va a ser
sentinels for like an incredibly long time because they're waiting for that perfect map to run it on, or is there like enough of them to not really ever work?
Pero simplemente tienes la mayor cantidad de recompensas al principio. Dice que hay ideas que son como más simples y ideas que son un poquito más grindy.
Is an option is a nice thing, but realistically, you want to get your value out of your sentinel because you want to then combine it with another one to get your value out of those mods, ideally again and again and again. You're basically trying to. I don't like using the breeding analogy for this one, but it's probably the easiest way to explain the genetics. But you're kind of wanting to have your little bloodline of sentinels that have the right mods on them that other people don't have.
And then once you hit a
and
unique
you don't do that by putting them on the shelf.
When you hit a unique sentinel, the bloodline dies out because you can't recombine it anymore.
Or so
you think.
Unless.
Yep, this is correct. But the uniques thing is really fascinating because these are consumable. It's basically like a consumable item where you're sacrificing a sentinel slot to have a thing which is going to give you cool stuff in a map. Like your demo headhunter, or the ability to actually freeze a bunch of monsters with a petrification wand and so on. And so we've tried very hard to have uniques that feel kind of like utility items.
Awesome. Because I don't get it. Some people, for me, Sentinel looks like one of the coolest leagues. You've moved the micromanagement away from the actual gameplay, which has always been a big concern for me. Like I'm running a map and now I gotta open this huge UI and like monsters are hitting me and it's really annoying to deal with. But here it seems like you're dealing with all of that stuff outside of the map. And then eventually once you're in the map, you're purely focusing on gameplay. And since you're saying Sentinels to some degree are like utility and you're really using it in that way, to me, that's super cool. And yet I've seen people already complain about Sentinel even before playing it. And I don't get it.
Yeah. I like your summary there. I like the concept that you've explained it as, which I hadn't really considered explicitly, of the fact that the micromanagement, or management, because it's not too micro in my opinion, but the management is occurring in your hideout when you're preparing for your next map. Just like you're asking the question of what Scarab on my map.
Está hablando de que Rice, a él le gusta esta liga, le gusta bastante, que gente que no entiende cómo hay gente que no le guste, porque todo en esta liga, todo el micromanejo de esta liga, o sea, fuera del mapa, en lugar de entrar al mapa y tener que hablar con el NPC y abrir esta caja y todo eso se hace fuera. En el mapa solamente entras a mapear. Eso es un plus, pero por ejemplo, a mí lo que me gusta de las ligas es a veces los nuevos bosses cool, los nuevos desafíos raros que te puedan aparecer en la liga, que estén diseñados a hacer desafíos. Aquí no hay nada de eso. Y eso no quiere decir que la liga no me llama la atención. Me llama la atención, pero no es de las que más me llama la atención. O sea, como nombraron Breach, voy a nombrar Breach. O sea, a mí me encantaba, 4 nuevos jefes, wow, eso va a ser cool. Quiero ver qué onda son esos desafíos, cómo son esas Breaches, cómo son esos jefes.
I really belabored every point because I thought, you know what, let's just list everything. Let's just be verbose about it and make sure there were no questions. A, there were still questions, and B, it would have been better to gloss over some of the more complicated stuff, and then if in the Q&A Ziggy felt that it was unclear, maybe it's the time to do a deep dive, like, after an hour into some of those sentinel points, because then people still get the information. So I suspect that when doing our next league explanations, I will try to focus on headline issues so it's more easily understandable and less scary, and keep the minute detail for the Q&A.
I will admit my eyes glazed over a little bit when you were explaining the league mechanics. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then you'd be like, the next thing. I'm like, okay. And then you're on and I'm like, and then I said to a chat, like, we're following this. And a lot of people were like, no, I lost him like 3 paragraphs ago.
Yep. We'll do a better, more concise explanation next time.
You were kind of negative about Sentinel, no, Tarky?
So for me, it was mostly a case of if it was one Sentinel type and everything else was exactly the same, it was just one Sentinel in managing, I'd have been like, let's go. I think for me, it was my main concern was the 3 additional keybinds, and especially, and I'm sure this is something which is happening like with QA and alpha feedback and everything. It's that whole idea of in my mind, there'd be nothing worse than you're managing your 3 different sentinels and then they're taking too long to empower the enemies. And then it's once that frustration creeps in. I can't remember which league it was originally, but we've had it in the past with leagues where if in the first few days something's too slow, even when it gets fixed, then the players have they've just got that inbuilt no, it's too slow, I'm not doing it, and then people just skip it.
I mean, bestiary.
Yeah.
Tal que está hablando de su experiencia cuando vio lo de Sentinel. Dijo que él siente como que si llega a ser muy lento al principio, se va a sentir como que nunca lo voy a hacer. Y hay personas que van a pensar así como que aunque lo fixen, cuando se tiene muy lento no lo va a querer hacer.
And I saw a lot of the potential problem points of Arch Nemesis in Sentinel. I think it was just there were elements of it was quite samey. So there are things about it that I could see myself really liking. And also one thing, when I do my League reaction videos, Rise, I always try and take it from the point of view of what's the things that I could see people really having issues with. And even in that, I did say my favorite aspect of it was the fact that all of the micro or just management in general is happening outside of the mapping experience. I think that's the best single thing. Yeah, but also I'm a player who I don't really.
Y básicamente dijo lo que dijo Raiz de que le gusta que todo el micromanejo se haga fuera del mapa y no en el mapa. Qué manera de llorar estos pibes. No, o sea, no le están diciendo, no están así como que quejándose en la cara de Chris y ya. En cierta forma, hay personas que piensan como Tarky y personas que piensan como Raiz. O sea, yo tengo cosas en común con ambos. Yo también cuando vi que habían 3 sentinels distintos, es como que shit, son 3 sentinels distintos. O sea, ¿cómo manejas todo eso? Cada uno lo hace a tiempos distintos y todo esto. Es medio raro. Pero por otro lado, como Raiz, como que, oh, genial, todo eso lo hago fuera del mapa. No tengo que hacer nada, tengo que hablar con nadie en el mapa. Eso es cool.
Is one that a friend of mine has sent over already when hearing about the league, so it's interesting how it's one that comes up as well here. We decided not to go with activating at a random point as a mechanic here, but it certainly got discussed quite heavily.
I like that you pointed that out, Tarky, by the way. Just because a lot of people are like, oh, why are these podcasts so negative? But I feel like if we have the Chris Wilson over here, it's kind of easy to talk about the problems rather than just praising everything that's great about it, even though we do a little bit of that. And with that being said, as much as I've praised the lack of micromanagement, I worry about too frequent Sentinel switches. So basically, yes, you've only got 3 and they've got a substantial amount of charges, but sometimes those charges can have different durations. So now one has 8, one has 10, and one has 6, let's say.
Eso me preocupaba, las cargas de los
sentinelas. I go to a map, and then a couple maps I have to switch one, then I have to switch the other one.
Porque, por ejemplo, eso pasó en Legacy, que las pelotitas de porquerías esas, justo no lo nombró, es un tipo muy inteligente, tienen duraciones distintas. O sea, alguna pelotita dura una vez, otras son 2, otras son 3. Los sentinelas espero que tengan la misma duración para que tú los puedas cambiar todos a la vez.
Certain sentinel base types have way more charges than other ones, so that you can use those if the charge thing is annoying. It also means that you get a mod, you get way more uses out of it. That's a good base type, basically, to get stuff on because you just get more EV from it. It also means that we can have mechanics like a chance to not consume charges, or sentinels that can be used multiple times in a map is one of the things you can get access to. And so all of this is possible because of the fact that charges can vary. If we had a homogeneous thing where they're all exactly 10 charges, then assuming the player puts them into all exactly the same time, then they're kind of a set of sentinels together. But that we determined in the end just limited the design scope too much.
Okay, válido.
So given that they have different numbers of charges and they consume different
números,
rates because of
pero
these
también hay
mods,
distintos
then you're right,
modificadores con los que puedes jugar con eso.
to
mods de chance de que no consuma cargas, chance, puedes usar varias veces un sentinela en el mismo mapa, y eso es gracias a que hay distintas cargas. Pues si todos tuvieran la misma cantidad de cargas, todos los mapas o cada X cantidad de mapas, cambiarías todos los sentinelas a la vez, no podemos jugar con nada de eso. Eso limitaría el desarrollo. Válido. Yo solamente espero de que las cargas sean suficientemente amplias para que no se sienta como que cada mapa tenga que cambiar un sentinela, porque eso es molesto. Esa es mi única queja. No me acuerdo si lo dije en la reacción, pero eso me recordó al Legacy.
Hard disagree,
you go and put the next sentinel.
I got
you got 4 maps in your inventory.
Yeah.
You're carrying maps in your inventory. You have a dump tab. You're, taking everything out of the dump tab all at the same time. You're not doing this one by one. I mean, you guys have way too many items that are like literally one by one in your inventory, and clicking that every time, every single map, like moving everything to the correct tabs. Like, it just doesn't work. So in this way, I really worry that Sentinel might run into this problem.
That was exactly my issue as well.
So far, it's been okay in our testing, but let us know, right? Like, it's not. Our goal is that it's not too cumbersome. It's just that in terms of the number of swaps, if we add a queue for it, we're basically just increasing the buffer of how long you can go without doing a swap.
Like a dump tab. I just worry because this is, to me personally, I don't know how other people feel about this. This would ruin it. Straight up, this would be one of those things where in a league, I would be like, it was so close! And yet this giant fuck up happened. And I would hate for Sentinel to be like that, because in its concept, like, it's perfect for me. I love the system, but this would genuinely make me just go, yeah, I'm just not gonna worry about this for a couple maps. That will eventually result in I'm just gonna not worry about this at all, unless it's like incredibly rewarding in its gameplay at the very least. So I hope that you guys really pay attention to it, or at least look into it maybe in advance already. Shit, like we don't want to have another metamorph situation. Sorry.
Min-max the fun out of
Estoy diciendo Reyes que esto es algo que completamente me haría como que no voy a usarlo un par de mapas y eventualmente se convierte en no lo voy a usar nunca porque es molesto. Como lo que pasó con Arnemesis. Yo dejé de usar Arnemesis en algún momento. Porque es que, dude, o sea, era fastidioso. Siempre hacía el mismo Arnemesis y yo me cansé. La última pregunta y lo banean GG. A mí me parece que es válida esa queja. O sea, yo solamente espero de que haya suficiente distancia o suficiente tiempo entre cambiar un centinela por otro. No quiero sentir como que todos los mapas estoy cambiando esto, pues se va a volver un fastidio.
These 5 maps I have in my inventory and anything, I'm now taking it out of my inventory to put into my... And for me, that was where the main concern was. And then if I'm having those teething issues with the inventory management on top of having to juggle buttons on top, that's where I could see myself being like, actually, I'll just ignore the league mechanic. But I'm hoping that isn't the case in practice.
Well, it's been okay for us so far, and I admit, like, I'm not playing the same way that you guys are, but our QA guys we hire from maps, we stand around in hideouts and hire QA these days, so we're probably okay. But let us know on release, right? Like, if you have concerns about this, give us feedback on where the pain points are, and we'll find ways to address it.
Chris Wilson dice como que yo obviamente no juego como ustedes juegan, pero no tengo problemas hasta ahora, y la gente en QA que tenemos que hacen mapas fuertes o mapas de alto nivel no nos han dado problemas al respecto, pero vamos a tener como un ojo en esto.
Unlocks for the Sentinels. If you remember Scourge, we could get 3 spots for our maps, but the way we got those was the most RNG terrible thing to go through if you're a little bit unlucky. It was like people are like, wait, you have 3 slots? I got that question at least 100 times within like a week.
I had forgot that. I blocked that from my memory.
Oh, so just, true.
Just the slot.
The Sentinel slots are deterministic here. Basically, you've got your controller. You can choose what you're allocating. You may choose to rush to the other slots. Like, honestly, getting 3 Sentinels at the same time is a pretty big advantage, so you probably want to rush for those other slots. But you gain this power deterministically for killing empowered monsters. So as long as you're doing the league, you're going to get those slots, and the team can tell you exactly what level it's like. They'll be like mid-act 3, you're getting a next slot or whatever they've worked it out to be. But
está hablando acerca de qué tan difícil es conseguir los 3 slots de los centinelas. Porque en Scourge, ¿se acuerdan cada vez que veían mis cosas decían ya tienes 3 para hacerlo? Y eso era al azar, a veces sale, a veces no sale. Esto es determinístico, dice que no debería ser tan difícil, tal vez cuando termines los actos ya tienes los 3 slots. Si tú decides hacerlo, pues tú tienes que desbloquearlos en el mapa.
She's not like
talk to the guys about it.
Yeah, please, because it's really weird. I don't understand the reasoning behind why she would be so locked behind this stuff. She used to be super available.
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
Cool. I think you might have touched on this already before, so if you don't want to expand on it, feel free to drop it. A quite big complaint I've seen from a lot of the softcore trade players is the worry that with the Uber bosses just being unlocked from a keynode, that it's going to make the non-Uber versions very difficult, and we'll have a repeat of Legion where the fragment pricing, everything is like you're either doing 5-way or not doing them at all.
Eso es interesante.
Is there any concerns around that at all?
That is very interesting economically. We'll have to see it happen and then see what occurs, right? Like, it's hard to profitably It's hard to complete the
Está preguntando, ¿qué pasará para la gente de software que tú puedes traer las cosas, ¿verdad? Entonces, las invitaciones van a tener un precio y va a estar atado a la versión Uber, porque simplemente no va a valer la pena hacer las versiones normales. ¿Eso va a pasar en software? ¿O no? Y Chris está diciendo
prestige
que
stuff can be marginally more rewarding and a lot harder than normal content because of, you don't need to have significantly more rewards to make it worthwhile as a prestige thing. Now, I suspect those ratios are wrong here, but I think the intention is that these absolutely shower you in the game's best rewards. They're certainly better than normal rewards. Like, you do get, elevated sextants and some additional chance of getting things, but the content that spawns rarely does require quite a lot of runs. Like, getting an Awakened Enlightened support gem is not a guaranteed thing. In fact, expectation-wise, it might be more like 1 in 100 or something, right? Like, it's meant to be very chase and very, very hard to get, and so therefore, people may find that doing the Awakened bosses more as a prestige/optimization thing, as opposed to it's the way to get rich. And hopefully that will mean that the prices for the access to them don't go up too much.
That's there's a couple of loose monetization things that I don't talk about. Show is very low priority, so if people want to go for their things, go for it, and I can save my points for the end.
A mí me encantaría preguntar acerca de
What do you think, Chris, about streamers having a treaty to not play Detonate Dead for the event and having to resort to something like that?
I thought that was nullified.
I mean, sort of, but it was a big conversation.
We encourage you to play whatever build you feel is best, right? And if you want to take advantage of the statue life bug, go ahead, right? It's part of the game. It's what the meta is for 3.18, and the point is you know about it in advance. When I ask our devs, hey, what are you playing in 3.18? And they answer with their variant of Righteous Fire or whatever it is they're playing, which is Righteous Fire in 100% of the cases. They didn't say Detonate Dead. And I say, okay, but Detonate Dead's real OP. I'm getting 4 emails an hour about this. And they're like, nah, it's Righteous Fire, guys. So there's something going on over there with Inquisitors or something. Anyway,
oh my god,
it doesn't really, the Detonate Dead thing is
my god, Righteous Fire Inquisitor. Okay, here we go, dude.
Because of we chose not to fix the bug. It is more damage than we wanted it to do, but we don't think it's game breaking.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm not super concerned. We did rush to fix that Flame War thing. That was the case. I don't know if you heard about that yesterday, but that got fixed.
No, I didn't hear about that at all. I didn't. Was someone talking about? Have you guys had 1 million emails saying ask Chris about Flame War?
Chris preguntó a los desarrolladores que van a jugar. Que van a empezar. Y entonces dijeron que no, Rise of Fire. Y dice que en serio, pero Detonate Dead no está como super OP. Y dice que nah, Rise of Fire. Y Chris se dijo como que entonces hay algo raro pasando con Inquisitor y Rise of Fire.
In this meta, we wanted to preserve the meta as much as we could.
Y vi al chat y decía Pox, yep.
All right, I can jump to another question. What is the thought process behind releasing 10 skill gems in one league and then releasing none in the next? Why not release 5 in one and 5 in another one?
That's a good question. It pretty much comes down to what we're choosing to spend our dev time on, right? For 3.19, we're having the conversation at the moment of what areas are we doing, and we have skill gems on the list.
No las voy a nerfear, pero simplemente, está diciendo de que le preguntó a los desarrolladores que si iban a jugar Detonate Dead. Y dijeron que nah, Righteous Fire. Okay. Entonces, él dice como que, entonces hay algo raro que está pasando con Righteous Fire Inquisitor.
True. I just wonder because we're hearing with I mentioned on the podcast, Arch Nemesis, when it waited 8 years to implement, why can't these skill gems wait a little bit and have it a little bit more spread out? I don't know. To me personally, it would make more sense since I'm not gonna play 10 new skill gems, but 5 or 2. I totally
you still haven't played them. They're still new.
True. We typically don't. I mean, there weren't any skill gems last league, so I did play them, Octavian.
We typically don't. We try not to send back content, right? If the team said to me, guys, we're working in secret and we've made 10 skill gems, we'd probably just release them, right? We don't want to say, that's perfect for 3.22 next year sometime where we need some extra content. We'd rather get it out there and have people playing it. Now, it's become apparent to us that people like playing with new stuff, and because there needs to be constant new stuff, that means you do kind of need to plan around a trickle, which is kind of the opposite of our kind of get it all out there and give people more options earlier. But I'm beginning to understand now the fact that you have to have something shiny and new because there's a type of player that will only play with that while it's new, even though it's just as good or just as bad later on.
How many of those players do you think there are? I was curious about this.
Ok, es interesante. Estás hablando
Like,
acerca de las nuevas gemas y tal y esto. Y él dice como que...
Do you, like,
O sea, nuestra filosofía es si algo está en buen estado, lo sacamos para que lo jueguen lo más rápido posible. Pero nos estamos dando cuenta de que hay jugadores que les gusta jugar con cosas que son nuevas mientras son nuevas. Entonces, eso va en contra de nuestra filosofía, pues tal vez hay que guardar algo para tratar de sacar un poquito de todo, un poquito de eso a cada liga, pues. Pues si a mí me dijeran, mira, trabajamos en secreto en 10 skill gems y están funcionando, yo sacaría 10 skill gems ahora mismo.
And sure, we can make people use them by making them broken as hell and then putting them on alpha broken as hell and then saying we're not going to fix it and letting word get out and now everyone's playing them, but that doesn't seem healthy.
I think the devil's advocate...
Ya lo nerfearon, Halfis.
The Rise answer to that
ya dijeron que sí, que se enteraron ayer y ayer lo nerfearon.
Especially when we had the Link package, which I know that Ziggy and Amy were really excited for. They play loads of duo, and then it kind of... Well, Ziggy, you can talk about the Link package.
I liked Firelink a lot, but I was really disappointed that you can't link back and forth with each other. It felt overly punitive overall, the link balancing. That was my assessment in short.
I wonder if you could link to Sentinels. Anyway.
Oh, what?
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to talk about before I go on a little monetization talk?
What do you think, Darky?
Okay. So last time we had you on, Chris, me and Noogie were talking about monetization with you, loot boxes, and we're both actually very positive about the idea of the Battle Pass system. So I will admit I was actually a little disappointed with the Kerix Vault Pass, specifically for the two main reasons. I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on it. One was the Kerix Vault Pass spreading shop elements out of the shop window into the game base UI. Do you not worry that sets a bit of a dangerous precedent for other things going forward?
It's tricky because our reason for doing monetization is to raise money that lets us develop the game, right? Like at the end of the day, it isn't some obligatory thing we kind of have to do as devs where we wake up and need to do some degree of monetization. We need it to be effective, right? We actually want people to be aware of the stuff.
Está hablando de la monetización y de que el Kira Battle Pass te sale en el juego, ¿sabes? ¿No? Que es algo que me molesta mucho. Y agradezco que me hayan patrocinado eso porque odiaría ver eso constantemente.
In various forms is effective. Like we have the orange messages in chat, you know, for a few days after we release a mystery box, because if we don't do that, like every message that we forget to send makes us lose like $25,000. And so sometimes it makes me think, well, maybe we should send them more often. Maybe we should spam the fuck out of all this stuff, and then we know that would be bad. Putting an icon on the Atlas screen that shows that your progress can unlock skins is certainly negative if you don't want it to be there, but it is a necessary step that helps. Like the money from that icon has let us hire 2 more artists to work on Path of Exile 2 for this year, right? You know, that's a good thing. That means that it's getting done with less overtime for other people. It's being done with higher quality. Like this is a very positive thing for everyone. And so I'm very careful to try to make sure we don't cross a line. We don't have ads on the loading screens. We're trying to be careful, but we appreciate the feedback. It gets in the way for some people. That's fair enough. And maybe we do need a way that if you have indicated, look, I don't want to buy your damn Battle Pass, or I've already bought it, then the icon isn't there because it's just in the way potentially. So, you know, that's something we're discussing. Fair enough.
Ok, válido.
The intention is that
Están hablando acerca del Battle Pass y el icono. Tarky dice que tal vez que eso crea un precedente para poner más cosas, más publicidad ahí. Y Chris dice como que mira, o sea, cada vez que mandamos un mensaje de hey, tenemos una nueva loot box que puedes comprar y tal, cada vez que olvidamos mandarlo, son como $25,000 que perdemos. Y esos $25,000 o ese icono que está ahí nos permitió contratar a 2 artistas más para Puedes Exile 2, que va a hacer que lleguemos más rápido a nuestras metas y con menos gente trabajando de más.
And then it literally like forcibly opens the shop. You've got to click through like 4 things to get rid of it. And any and all immersion I had in that game was just instantly like dead. And I'm like, all right, cool. And things
entonces,
like that can really ruin
le dice como que obviamente, o sea, tal vez deberíamos poner algo para que si alguien dice, sabes, no quiero comprarme tu fucking Battle Pass, podemos no mostrarle ya.
Because you really cared about that core immersion and the atmosphere of the game. So then when you start getting these shop elements on there, it seems to kind of go against that.
Yeah, and this is one icon, as far as I'm aware, that's on the Atlas screen. And fair enough, I hear the feedback, but we've tried very hard to not go too spammy. Like, this isn't the case of us forcibly opening the UI on top of you, like, buy this whenever you open something, which would certainly be really effective. By the way, new Atlas Pass soon. Anyway.
Yeah. And then finally on that, and I think you'd maybe get more purchases, but what was the reasoning for letting players purchase the vault with their points? Because it's still money they've spent on the game anyway.
Right. So the tricky thing is that when you buy a supporter pack, let's say you buy a $30 supporter pack, you get $30 of points, and you also get $30 of microtransactions by the value we normally sell stuff for in the store. So as far as we're concerned, supporter pack purchases let you buy points at approximately half price. So internally in our accounting, if someone were to buy a microtransaction and they spend 200 points on it, I'm putting that down as $10 of actual accrued revenue that we've made, because they also got other microtransactions we had to make with a supporter pack that unlocked it. We want $30 of real money for the 8 microtransactions the person's getting in the battle pass. And so we had to choose, do we sell it for $30 or do we sell it for 600 points? And 600 points had incredibly negative unilateral feedback from everyone we spoke to. 600 points is far too expensive for a battle pass. Whereas $30, because of the fact that you get twice as much value with the points thing, was more palatable. And yeah, I get it's an expensive battle pass. Some games get away somehow with pricing their stuff really cheap. I don't understand how that works, at least for our business model, where not that many people spend. This is kind of what we have to do to justify it. And so it is potentially something we can change in the future, right? Like there are a variety of reasons.
Está hablando de algo muy, muy particular acerca de cómo funciona su sistema de monetización. Es súper interesante. No quiero descuartizar nada de lo que va a decir. Así que voy a esperar a que termine de hablar para decirles.
And stop adding micros to the store for points, and the points are all just useless now. That would be terrible, and we don't want to go anywhere near that. We've got lots of micros coming out. Very interesting new ones, as you've seen from the recent pattern of what we did in the supporter pack. We have some interesting stuff coming. We have a very compelling new mystery box coming, which is completely different to what we've done in the past. And yeah, we think there's going to be a lot of stuff people to spend their points on, even if they can't use it on the Atlas Pass.
Ok. Está hablando acerca de que la monetización es súper importante en Puedes Exile, y si ellos agarraron un Battle Pass y dijeran, en lugar de $30, vale 600 puntos por el tema de los supporter packs. Los supporter packs te dan, si tú pagas $60, te dan 600 puntos y las microtransacciones para que valen 600 puntos. Y tú pudieras comprarte el Battle Pass. Nosotros hicimos testing acerca de esto y le preguntamos a un montón de personas y fue unilateral. Todo el mundo dio que fueran 600 puntos porque es demasiado. Él dice que hay algunos juegos que logran salirse con la suya con esto y no entiendo cómo logran hacerlo, pero tal vez no tenemos suficiente gente para que puedan para que funcione nuestro sistema de monetización, y por eso es que vale $30.
Are you overall successful with the battle pass, considering the balancing act of being tasteful and then also earning money, but then also having the player receive something satisfying?
It did well. I believe, and I know this because, so I have data.
Le preguntaron acerca de cómo le fue el Battle Pass y dijeron que le fue bien.
And our monetization in general is a fraction of other games. We could be making a lot of money if we cross certain lines. And likewise with the Battle Pass, we could be making literally 10 times more sales from it if we cross certain lines. And examples are having it so you can pay to upgrade tiers and all those kind of tricks, or having it so you have to buy the Battle Pass before you start unlocking things in it to get a discount and all this kind of stuff. We said, no, you can't pay to upgrade tiers. These actually show the fact the player earned it, so we don't want your money as a way of bribing us to give you the thing early. We also don't want to punish you for unlocking some maps, like completing some maps before you buy the pass. And so we made a bunch of concessions for how we feel that it should be to be fair, and that has reduced the income to a number we're still happy with, like it's good money. But we are aware of the fact that if we started going down that line towards being like the other games, there would certainly be better money. And that's not something that we're interested. Like our goal here is to try to provide better value for users. Like these micros we put in the recent support packs were a result of us saying,
ellos saben de que si cruzaran ciertas líneas podrían hacer muchísimo más dinero. Dice que sienten que el dinero que estaban teniendo está bien. Y ellos entienden como, por ejemplo, ¿qué tal si el Battle Pass saliera más barato si si lo compraras antes de entrar a los mapas? Entonces haría que más personas lo comprase. O que si pudieras pagar para desbloquear ciertos tiers. Y se sabe que nosotros podemos hacer más de esas cosas y ganar muchísimo más dinero. Con los números que nosotros tenemos de personas que compraron eso, hicimos una fracción de lo que hacen otros juegos. Pero no queremos cruzar ciertas líneas para que por lo menos se sienta de que tú estás consiguiendo algo.
have the chest do one thing, and the boots are going to do another interesting thing. Like
Ya la
an
vi,
example
Circle
is we
Night.
have
La
boots in
pusieron
the
acá
mystery
cuando
box,
empezó el
which
podcast.
scale based on movement speed. The
Fuimos
point of
los
the
primeros que la
boots
vimos.
is that as you're running, they leave like a trail behind them, which looks like lightning. And the more movement speed you have, the more crazy the effect is. So this means that a regular player, as they get more movement speed throughout the game, as they progress their character, see the effect get bigger and bigger, so they can feel some degree of progress. And any player who's juicing movement speed with like, some of the fun uniques and stuff, get an absolute insane effect after them. And so our goal there is making sure that normally boots would just be some small thing that you don't consider as part of, you got it with an armor set, you don't care. And now it's actually part of the identity of your build. And then to make sure it fits in with lots of builds, we have it so there are many variations of the effects and colors that you can get on those boots. You can have like a cool blue lightning one versus green lightning versus an orange one and so on. So it fits in with many different builds. And then the other thing with the new mystery box, which I probably shouldn't be talking about prematurely, but we're also preventing duplication occurring except for the variations. So if you've opened the orange lightning movement speed boots, you can't get the orange lightning movement speed boots again. The worst case scenario is you might open the green lightning movement speed boots, but that is different for a different character. But basically, we are preventing you opening the same item multiple
Esto está muy
times.
bueno.
And so generally speaking, you'll be getting completely unique
Muy bueno
items
esto.
with each mystery box
Muy,
open,
muy bueno.
or at worst, a different variation of one
Dice
of the
que
ones that you
ahora
already
con las
have,
nuevas
which in some cases can
loot
be a
boxes que van a
more,
poner,
one that you're actually looking forward
no
to
te
for
van
a
a caer
particular
más
theme you're trying to
duplicados.
put together.
Does that only relate to the character items? Because you said variation. Does that mean that you can still get multiple, I don't know, stormy clouds in your hideout or whatever? Does that duplication still happen there?
The new mystery box only has character microtransactions. They're all in the same. They're all in the same theme as like what we just did in the supporter pack. It's that, but with different types of theme variation. Like an example is there's a weapon
No va a
effect which
haber,
when you kill a monster,
no va a
you
haber
see
nada
like a
para el
shower of
hideout en las
treasure based on the
siguientes
rare, like the magic
cajitas.
find of the monster.
Todo
So
va a ser
as
para el
your player
personaje.
gets more magic find, and as the monster has more of
Genial.
an innate magic
No sé por qué me
find, you get a
emociona
bigger
tanto si
shower
yo no voy a
of retained
comprarlas,
treasure
pero
from the monster.
genial.
The idea where you kill a boss and you get a big one, you kill like you
Quiero
juiced
decir,
your magic find in your character. You
Croxi
get big explosions of
necesita
treasure
suscripciones
everywhere.
para poder comprar estas
This is, of
cajitas,
course,
gente.
but theme-wise,
Croxi
we've got,
necesita
like, bronze coins, silver coins, gold coins,
tener
and
estas
that's the
cajitas.
variation you'll get there. Where if
Así
you want
que
the gold
necesitamos
coin one, because of course
más,
gold is better than
necesitamos
bronze,
jeques,
then you might
necesitamos
open
jeques
some more mystery
activos.
boxes to try to get that. Or maybe you're happy with bronze because it fits some color of your build, for example. And so all the items in the mystery box
Estoy de
are ones that
acuerdo,
affect your
Bonete.
character, so they're all at a much flatter value. Now, the key thing here is this box is structured entirely differently. Because you don't get duplicates, and because everything is very expensive micro-wise in there, we've changed the price point of the box. But you'll see when you actually look at the contents and stuff that this represents better value for the player in terms of effective points for what you're getting. And the lack of duplicates, of course, means that there's now a cap where once you've opened some number of boxes, you've got all of the things and you don't have to pour hundreds and hundreds of dollars in.
I mean, personally, for me, that like solves a lot of the ethical things I've been talking about you for years. So that is absolutely amazing as far as I'm concerned.
Estoy de
So,
acuerdo
yeah,
con eso.
Well,
hats off. That's great.
We'll announce it in more detail. But the goal here is to say, look, previously there was extra money being made by people. It's something that's associated with gambling behavior. And if we can fix this so it's a more fun experience for people, so that a person's getting positiveness every time they open a box, that's a better thing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Could we hear a number on the maximum amount that we can potentially spend on these boxes?
Oh, I have a correction. I said there are no hideout micros in the box. We have an awesome hideout micro. We have teleporters. So you can get hideout teleporters that warp you from one location to another, and the color variation there is different colors, so you can put like green ones in your green hideout or that kind of stuff. Or if you want to see the green teleporter goes to your, your stash area, then you can have a green one there, and the orange one goes to your crafting area or whatever. So there are hideout micros. They're just not boring ones. They're ones that actually do something.
So you could still end up in the scenario of ending up with like 50 of them, or
you can only get one of each. So the way this works, and this is getting way deep into stuff. If you open the hideout micro of a red teleporter, you cannot get the red teleporter again. But you want multiple red teleporters because they're awesome. So we're doing this complicated system where if you have opened something from a mystery box that you might want more than one of, you can buy it from the store for the price of a mystery box. So if I want a second red teleporter, I can go to the store and spend an extra 50 points to get one. So anyway, long story short, we're trying very hard to solve all of these issues, and I wasn't really
50 points, lo dijo.
Reasonable venue. 3 hours into a podcast.
Vale 50 puntos la cajita, lo acabo de decir.
How many things?
La cajita va a valer 50 puntos. Pero como no se puede repetir, el valor va a ser un poquito más alto. No valen 50 puntos las cajitas, valen menos, ¿verdad?
15-ish types of things in the mystery box, ignoring variations for a second. So there's a much higher chance that you open something that's distinct.
30.
And then there's several
Ok,
variations
ahora
of each.
valen
I think
50.
we're averaging about
Valen 50,
5.
pero no se va a poder repetir nunca. O sea, básicamente, no lo consiguen en la cajita, no se repita más nunca.
But it comes out to around 70
Por lo tanto, si compras 10 cajitas, es imposible que te salgan 10 cosas iguales o
This does
nada.
mean that a user, the box is priced at 50 points now because there's both basically consistently high value stuff in it without duplicates.
Okay.
And so this means a user who wants literally everything could spend $350 worth of points in order to get everything from the box. But previously, if you spent that, there was no guarantee at all that you were getting all of the things, whereas now you do complete the entire set.
I have to say, as stupid as this will sound to a lot of people, of anything you've done in Pee-wee in the last, 4 years, I genuinely think, for me as a player, this is the best thing you've done.
Sí, suena estúpido, Tarque.
It sounds really stupid to a lot of people, but I think that's a really good stance to take.
Tarque dice que esto es lo más significativo que ha hecho para PvE en los últimos 4 años. Y dijo que eso iba a sonar estúpido. Sí, suena estúpido. No creo que sea lo
I
mismo.
don't like these, give us the old ones back. And then we've got this entire mystery box full of new style micros that do interesting gameplay stuff. And we'd be thinking, oh dear, what do we do now? And so it's been incredibly risky to change monetization stuff. But the goal here is just to make it more interesting. Here's the thing, right? You say to us before, Chris, do you actually enjoy Path of Exile? You talk about hard mode. Do you actually love it?
Pero igual yo me alegro. O sea, si es algo positivo. Yo no tengo ese problema, pero hay gente que tiene ese problema de que, ¿sabes? Quiere tal cosa y tiene mala suerte y gasta más de lo que debería gastar. Así que está bueno que...
What are you doing, bro? Right? It's just funny to play with that stuff, and we kind of feel there's an extra level of value. Maybe it goes with the theme of what your character looks like, but the ability to just kind of troll other players with it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great.
It's super cool from my perspective. I mean, MTXs have been lackluster for a very long time. There's been so many games that have all these innovative methods of rewarding the player, and this was I don't know, it just always felt really stale. Here's a set of wings, here's another set of wings.
I've really liked the art we've been making for the MTXs. That's the thing. I like the quality of the armor sets. It looks great. They go really well together. I have no problem whatsoever with what things look like. There's so much creativity. It's just that at the end of the day, they were inert. You look like a god, but you're just some level 7 character that slapped it on. You're not necessarily very good at the game as a result. Whereas this new stuff encourages you to be better at the game, right? It triggers based on gameplay things. It causes things to happen when you crit. And the result of this is you're like, I'm going to
Coño, Chris, deja de venderme la
I
caja.
like that cool effect. And it actually
¿Qué está
funnels you
diciendo?
into better
De que,
character
ok,
building.
mira,
Or at
sí,
least
se
that's
ve
the
muy
goal.
linda todas
Rewards you
las
for,
cosas que hemos hecho. Me gusta el
engaging with the
arte.
game properly.
Tú te puedes
So
ver
that's the
como un
reason
dios,
why we're
¿verdad?
trying very hard
Pero eres nivel
to have all
7
this cool stuff
y no
that-
puedes matar nada.
Yeah, this is really fun
En
stuff
cambio,
in the
estas
mystery box,
cosas que salen en la
actually.
caja
I'm not going to spoil too much. We'll make a video, we'll show you.
quieren que tú seas mejor jugador. Pero, por ejemplo, tiene una cosa de las botas que dijo que mientras más rápido vayas, el efecto se va a ver más fuerte.
I mean, I know they obviously watch the podcast, but this is 3 hours in, so they might have given up in the Sentinel part.
Por lo
The
tanto,
thing which I do find particularly joy about that is everyone's like, Tarky, no one cares
va a
about
haber cosas en la
monetization,
caja
what
que
is wrong with
supongo
you?
que mientras más
This
daño
is the bit
hagas,
which gets clicked the most
más
all over
brillante
Reddit and
lo que
everything,
sea.
so, yeah.
I think they pieced out
Yeah,
after
please.
the first hour of the podcast because we were kind of talking
Te pega
about
credits,
it's
sí,
we're
dude.
supposed to talk about Sentinel and concrete things, and we're asking you about all these.
How dare you
philosophical
talk about
developer
game design? We're not interested
It's so much
in
more
that.
interesting to us. I don't know.
Yeah, no, of course, exactly.
There is a risk here because with the mystery box stuff, I could have just waited, structured a news post, got 4 people to proofread it, got a copy editor involved, made a video. I mean, we will obviously do all of those things, and then released it where we control the messaging, right? But here, it's just an arbitrary explanation that if it gets clipped, maybe missing context, and Reddit decides, actually, I hate this, then we have a large uphill battle. So it is very risky to reveal it on the podcast, but I'm hoping people will take it at face value and understand the context and also be very excited about it, because it is...
Creo que eso está hablando de lo peligroso que es lo que acaba de hacer. Pero...
the best MTX decision you've made since, well,
You've never made a different MTX decision.
Since the inception of the game, right? You've tried a lot of things that just kind of when I heard them, I was like, nah, that doesn't fly. I'm actually now I kind of want to buy a mystery box. It's been a very long time since I've felt to myself, I want to buy more mystery boxes.
Oh yeah, the Lost Ark player wants to buy some mystery boxes, huh? Okay, dude.
Nice. I'm sorry, we don't put any advantage in these boxes.
Oh.
It was funny to me though when everybody was jumping in my stream. I'm playing Lost Ark. Like the
No
game
llegaste diciendo de que esto le llama la atención después de muchísimo tiempo que jamás le había llamado la atención. Esto le llama la atención de comprar cajitas, pues. Y entonces el Rage que oh, mira, el jugador de Lost Ark quiere comprar cajitas misteriosas, ¿no? Y Chris Wilson dijo, lo siento, no ponemos ningún tipo de ventaja en estas cajitas.
It tracks how much strength you have. And if you have a low amount of strength, you look like normal. And then the more strength you have, the more jacked the Marauder gets until he's like totally hulking out. And so internally, this has got the name the Marauder. And yeah, we're trying to decide, do we actually go with that for the release name?
You have to.
Marauder skin. Yeah. So, but we're trying to just do fun stuff like that, because if you build a Marauder who's got masses of strength for whatever build you're doing, and he's just walking around town with his, like, you know, just looking like he's been in the gym for the last 4 years with steroids, like it fits your build and it's funny. You know,
está diciendo de que ellos tienen una idea de hacer algo que mientras más fuerza tengas, más strength tengas, te veas más yuca, más papiado. Y entonces dice que internamente el nombre era el Marauder y Roid en inglés se le dice a las esteroides, o es algo corto de esteroides. Sería como que el machoroide, sería como, no sé, en español o algo así.
Had a great time. Thanks everyone.
Okay, eso fue bueno.
See you this weekend.
Chris. Awesome.
Right, catch you later.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.
Yeah.
I think
We're waiting for you to leave to continue to talk behind your back.
Oh wait, no, hang on. No, I can say the thing. I can say the thing. Chris, you can go now.
All right. Thank you for your permission, sir.
Perfect.
Nice. I guess.